Chapter 4108. Gong Fan did not notice Yun Shirshi's strange gaze. "Good morning, Mommy." "Good morning, you're up so early." Yun Shirshir smiled. Gong Fan was also a little surprised. "I was woken up by the alarm." "Why did I wake up so early?" I'll go prepare breakfast for you. Get ready to get up and wash your face and brush your teeth." Yun Shirshir hurriedly left, wondering if she should report to Gong Jia. Gong Fan saw that Yun Shirshir left in a hurry and found it strange. He instinctively went to the bedside cabinet to search for something. After searching for a while, he suddenly found a notebook. He picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Yu had the habit of keeping a diary, and so did Gong Fan. Rather than calling it a diary, it was more like a way for Yu and Gong Fan to communicate. Yu understood what happened to Gong Fan that day through his diary. Gong Fan also understood what happened to Yu over the past few days through Yu's diary. This time, Gong Fan slept for a long time. He did not know why, but when he woke up again, it was actually half a month later. He actually slept for half a month. 15 days. In the past, he had never slept for such a long time. Before he could figure out the reason, Gong Fan suddenly flipped to the latest page of the diary. "I must wake up early tomorrow to make a dessert table for Natalia. She has been thinking about it for a long time. I've decided to make her a Hello Kitty-themed dessert table. At night, I'll prepare the tools and wait for work to start the next day. But I'm a little worried. What if Gong Fan wakes up? He doesn't know anything about baking." Gong Fan was silent. Hello Kitty. Dessert table? What was that? Dessert? And, who was Natalia? This name had already been mentioned in several pages. Looking at the name, it seemed to be a girl, but, who was it? Gong Fan put the notebook aside and sorted out his emotions. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, he walked into the living room. Xiao Yichen had already finished his breakfast and was looking at him expectantly. Yu, why are you taking so long? Hurry up and finish your breakfast, we have to set off. Gong Fan narrowed his eyes. Yu? When Xiao Yichen heard her tone, he shuddered and hurriedly corrected himself. Fan, don't call me Fan. Gong Fan didn't like such a greeting. Xiao Yichen hurriedly explained, but that sounds so intimate. Gong Fan immediately expressed his refusal. No. Xiao Yichen was speechless. "Ah, what a tsundere Fan. Yun Shirshir brought out the bread and milk." Gong Fan sat at the dining table and asked curiously, "Mommy, who is Natalia?" She said vaguely, Yu seems to like her. He promised her that he would make her a beautiful dessert table today. Do you know how to make it? Gong Fan shook his head. How could he know how to cook? He didn't know anything. Not to mention baking. Then, Yun Shirshir was in a dilemma. What should we do then? Yu had prepared everything and wanted to perform well today. Gong Fan pursed his lips. He was in a dilemma, but he didn't want to disappoint Yu. Is the dessert table very difficult? Xiao Yichen and Yun Shirshir looked at each other and nodded hesitantly. A little. Gong Fan was silent again. Chapter 4109. However, they had already made a promise. No matter what, if another personality suddenly appeared, he had to complete the task at hand on behalf of the other personality. In the past, it seemed that Yu had been cleaning up his messes. That was fine. Now, he couldn't possibly back out. Along the way, Gong Fan held onto his cell phone. He wasn't playing with it. Instead, he was studying it seriously. He looked up tutorials and techniques on baking on the internet and made use of the limited time he had to study hard. Yun Shirshir was quite confident in Gong Fan. Baking was actually not difficult. As long as he was careful, serious, and slightly particular about the food, he would be able to complete it very well. However, it was obvious that she had made a mistake in her estimation in some aspects. Gong Fan was very particular about everything except food. As the food party, he was very particular about it, but he didn't pay attention to how to complete a dish. When they arrived at Natalia's house, the car stopped. Gong Fan still looked confused. He couldn't figure it out. He didn't even know what butter was and what cheese was. What was a mold and what was saccharin? Should he give up? He really couldn't figure out what these formulas were made of. If he was given dozens of mathematical Olympiad questions, it would still be relatively easy. Wasn't it difficult for him to bake? However, Gong Fan could only imagine Yu's disappointed expression in the diary. It seems that I should let you sleep for a longer time. Gong Fan suddenly remembered that he seemed to have been in a deep sleep during this period. Could it be that, was it someone who had been pressing on him and not letting him wake up? Could it be that, Yu despised him for being a scammer? Didn't want him to show his face? If this baking wasn't done well, Yu might be very angry. Gong Fan held his forehead helplessly. It didn't matter who was angry, but he couldn't be angry at this little ancestor. Hence, when he walked to the kitchen, Gong Fan could only bite the bullet and put on the cartoon-style apron that Hua Jin had bought. He stood in the baking area with a gloomy expression. Oven, mold, cream, all the tools were available. These were all prepared by Yu. It was all for this day to give Natalia a surprise. All right. Surprise, surprise, there was surprise but no joy. Gong Fan told himself, don't worry about the adjustment of the formula or the heat. Just roll up your sleeves and do it based on your feelings. He did not believe that even though they were two personalities, Yu could cook so well while he could not. Come at me directly. Gong Fan simply followed his intuition and started to do it. The dessert rack is hello. Kitty was pink in color, so Yu's original idea was to have strawberry-flavored desserts. The dessert counter consisted of multi-layer cakes, cupcakes, shaped biscuits, mousse, pudding, and other small desserts. He tried the donut first. According to the recipe and tutorial, Gong Fan carefully added the softened butter with fine sugar and salt. Wait a minute. Salt? He was stunned for a moment and read the tutorial 3 times to make sure that he was not mistaken. He still felt strange. Aren't donuts supposed to be sweet? Why add salt? Forget it. Gong Fan closed his eyes and began to beat it evenly with the egg beater. His ideal was to make it slightly puffy. In the end, it was directly turned into liquid by him. Liquid, failure. Chapter 41:10. He originally thought that everything was difficult at the beginning, but he didn't expect that the next step would definitely be much more difficult than the beginning. Next, the tutorial said to add milk powder. Milk powder. What was milk powder? Gong Fan looked at the circle of packaging bags on the dining table. Most of them were imported ingredients. If it was in English, he could still understand it, but some were in Italian and some were in French. Moreover, even if it was in English, he didn't know what this thing was. Hence, he decided to taste it himself. It was milk powder. It should be easy to identify. He reached his finger into a packaging table and gently tasted it. Oh? What was this? It was astringent, and the powder was a little smooth. There was also an inexplicable bitter taste. It shouldn't be milk powder. Milk powder should be sweet. He tasted another generation, flour. Gong Fan tried many kinds of powdery things and finally found milk powder. Suddenly, he felt a sense of relief. I finally found you. Fortunately, I didn't give up. He was filled with emotions in his heart, so he wanted to gently shake the milk powder into the mixing bowl. Rustle, Gong Fan was silent. Looking at about half a bowl of milk powder, he was a little confused. It seemed that, there was a little too much milk powder. However, the formula didn't seem to say how much milk powder to add. This amount should be just right, right? If there was too much milk powder, then the subsequent ingredients should be slightly more. There shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, he liked milk powder. Gong Fan made up his mind, so he braced himself and continued to do it. He cracked 4 eggs and accidentally broke the eggshell shards into the egg. The shards were mixed into the thick egg liquid and couldn't be picked out no matter how hard he tried. He simply used chopsticks and finally picked out the fragments. He added dry yeast, flour, and butter one after another. He directly kneaded the dough into a ball and threw it into the toaster with a thud. Yunshishi, who was passing by the kitchen, heard this strange sound and was a little worried, so she sneaked into the kitchen. Gong Fan was rummaging through the cupboards in search of strawberry-flavored chocolate sauce, so he didn't notice Yunshishi sneaking in. The dough was a little big, and the toaster was buzzing. Soon, after 10 minutes, Gong Fan opened the toaster and took out the hot dough with gloves. At that time, the dough had already fermented and was bigger than before. However, why does it feel so hard? It clearly said that the dough would be softer than before when it was taken out of the toaster. Forget it. Gong Fan used his hand to press out the gas inside. In the end, he accidentally cracked the dough. Should I add more water? That wouldn't do. This step wasn't mentioned in the tutorial. He hadn't reached the final step yet. Perhaps this was a normal phenomenon. Yes, its existence was reasonable. Gong Fan left the fermented dough to dry for 10 minutes before he started to fiddle with the strawberry chocolate sauce. The strawberry chocolate sauce was ready-made, so all he had to do was mix it according to the right ratio. Chapter 41:11. Why did it feel like something that you did with such ease had become a stumbling block when it came to him? Baking was so difficult. Gong Fan felt that his head was about to become twice as big. He braced himself and started to roll the dough. In the end, he was so busy that he finally used the mold to cut the donuts into circles. He spread the strawberry jam evenly on the donuts and walked to the pan of oil. Yunshishi did not want to disturb his great undertaking at first, but when she saw that he was about to put the donuts with strawberry jam into the pan, she wanted to stop him. Splash, crackle, oil splattered everywhere. Gong Fan calmly held the pan in his hand and expressionlessly blocked the oil that was about to splash on his face. His expression was ice cold. After about 10 seconds, he turned off the fire and approached the pan of oil. Only then did he realize that there was something charred on the surface of the oil. He did not know that applying the strawberry jam was a step that could only be done after the oil was out of the pan. If he put the strawberry jam into the pan of oil, it would be charred. He looked at the 2 black balls of donuts, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. Gong Fan carefully scooped up the 2 balls of donuts. Looking at the 2 balls of donuts, he could not help but feel a little worried. What was this? He had been busy for a long time, and these 2 donuts were actually charred? Gong Fan's eyelids twitched violently. The resentment in his heart towards the donuts gradually rose. No. He could not accept such a passable product. He had to start over. It was still early anyway. Gong Fan had lost count of how many donut-making trips. Yunshishi watched from behind. Looking at Gong Fan's calm but flustered appearance, she could not help but want to laugh. He was calm because no matter how troublesome it was, he was still expressionless. He was flustered because he could always make the simple steps in Yu's hands very complicated. Crackle, the donuts were put into the pan of oil for the 3rd time. Behind him, Xiao Yichen also tiptoed into the kitchen and quietly stood behind him, watching with Yunshishi. When the donuts were ready, they finally had the shape that a donut should have. Of course, as for the taste, that was another matter. The desserts from Gong Fan's hands would definitely not taste good. For some reason, this was Yunshishi's intuition. Gong Fan did not notice that Hua Jin had also walked in behind him. The 3 of them stared at him with their mouths agape as he made desserts. Tragic. How tragic. It was extremely tragic. Could it be any more tragic? Hua Jin looked at the trash can. There were several black pancakes, and his heart ached. At the same time, there was some drumming. She wondered how palatable the donut that Gong Fan had made would be. Could it be food poisoning? Why don't I let Little Chen test the poison first and see if it's edible? I don't want Natalia to get food poisoning after eating his donut. I have a feeling that Fan Fan isn't making donuts, whispered Little Chen as he inched closer to his mother's ear. Yun Shishir heard this and held back her laughter. She asked in return, if it's not donuts, then what is it? Xiao Yichen frowned seriously. It's poison. Yun Shishir was speechless. Mommy, can I not eat it? Xiao Yichen trembled. I'm scared. Chapter 41:12. Fan Fan, is this a donut? Hua Jin asked curiously. When Gong Fan heard the voice, he turned around abruptly and saw 4 people standing behind him, looking at his creation. He grunted and said, donuts. Hua Jin, on the other hand, was wondering if this thing could be eaten. Would it look a little scary? Perhaps it would be able to cope with it after eating it. Hence, he instructed Xiao Yichen, go and try it. What do you think of the taste? Xiao Yichen was shocked. He didn't expect Hua Jin to push him into the fire pit. Why didn't he try it himself? He was obviously asking him to test the poison. Xiao Yichen pouted, obviously unhappy. He asked in return, why don't you try it? Xiao Fan's desserts must be delicious. As Hua Jin spoke, he glanced at him from the corner of his eye. Why? Do you think Fan Fan's desserts taste bad? Gong Fan couldn't be bothered with how Hua Jin addressed him. Instead, he glared at Xiao Yichen and snorted. Why? Do you think it tastes bad? Xiao Yichen gulped and shook his head vigorously. No. I believe in my brother's cooking. Then try it. Try, Xiao Yichen was so shocked that he couldn't speak. What the hell, had he really become a test subject for poison? He felt terrible. He wanted to cry. Why was his life so hard? He was always pushed out to do such things at critical moments. However, Xiao Yichen didn't want to offend his brother. He immediately took a step forward righteously and looked like he was ready to die. Okay. I'll try it. Gong Fan was unhappy when he saw his brother's expression. He looked like he was about to jump into the fire pit. You don't seem willing. Why would I? Xiao Yichen looked at him reproachfully. I think it should taste good. Then don't look like that. Xiao Yichen was speechless. He let out an "oh" and had no choice but to accept his fate and pick up a donut. Looking at the burnt surface, he hardened his heart, gritted his teeth, and took a bite. A comet colliding with Earth, volcano eruption, various apocalyptic scenes flashed before his eyes. Xiao Yichen felt as if his entire body was being scorched by lava, and tears almost flowed out of his eyes. What was that? Is this a donut? There was no sweetness at all. It was like eating a piece of charred coal. Not only was the color similar, but the taste was also exactly the same. It tasted so bad that he wanted to cry. Even taking a punch wasn't as painful as this. However, even someone like Xiao Yichen, who had a strong tolerance, did not frown. He only snorted and said calmly, not bad. Gong Fan's eyes lit up. Really? Yes, it's true, but I don't think it's the kind of smell Natalia likes. Is it too sweet? Gong Fan muttered again, I did put a little too much milk powder and saccharin. Xiao Yichen muttered to himself, it would be better if it was unreasonably sweet. At least there was sweetness. What was this smell? This was the smell of charcoal. It was bitter and astringent. Why were the two personalities, Gong Fan and Yu, so different when they were clearly the same person? Xiao Yichen couldn't help but miss Yu. You don't look well. Gong Fan sized him up and became suspicious. Chapter 41:13. When Yun Shishir heard this, she inexplicably despised her son. Xiao Yichen, you're really good at lying through your teeth. It's fine if it doesn't taste good, but you even put on an act. However, Yun Shishir was touched. Xiao Yichen must have been afraid that Gong Fan would be disappointed and upset, so he endured the taste and pretended that it tasted good. It's delicious. Xiao Yichen gave Gong Fan an exaggerated thumbs up. When Gong Fan heard this, he was inexplicably touched. It turned out that the donuts he made were this delicious. Even Xiao Yichen was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat the donuts he made in the future. Gong Fan pursed his lips and revealed a rare gentle smile. It's okay. In the future, if you want to eat it, I'll make it for you, okay? When Xiao Yichen heard this, he was so shocked that he almost couldn't close his mouth. He clicked his tongue and looked helplessly at Yun Shishir. At that moment, Yun Shishir could only look helplessly at the sky and pretend that she wasn't there. Hua Jin tried his best to cover his mouth and snigger. This was too funny. What kind of mother would trick her own son? However, this Gong Fan was so smart that he couldn't tell that Xiao Yichen was just being perfunctory. How was it delicious? Just by looking at its appearance, one could tell that it tasted terrible. Moreover, looking at Xiao Yichen's pained and embarrassed expression, it was enough to prove that this thing tasted terrible. Hua Jin shuddered in his heart. He was deeply in awe of Gong Fan's culinary skills. Gong Jia glanced at Xiao Yichen and then at Hua Jin and winked. Hua Jin carefully leaned over and discussed with him, why don't we explain the situation to Natalia and forget about the dessert table? If we really let Natalia eat this, she'll definitely be poisoned. It was rare that Gong Jia agreed with her. Yes. With that, he raised his head and said to Gong Fan, Xiao Fan, you don't have to make desserts. When Gong Fan heard this, he was puzzled. Why? Because, Gong Jia frowned and made up a lie. Natalia has a cold. She shouldn't eat anything too sweet. How about this? When Gong Fan heard this, he raised his eyebrows and complained, I've worked so hard for so long and finally made the donuts. You're telling me that she has a cold and doesn't want to eat them. Couldn't you have told me earlier? Gong Jia, the desserts you make have to be F*King edible. Is this food edible? Even puppies don't eat it. Hua Jin looked at Gong Fan, but he couldn't bear it. Especially when he saw the disappointment in his eyes, he felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness. Gong Fan had worked so hard to make it, he couldn't possibly let it go to waste. Forget it, he couldn't let his painstaking efforts go to waste. Hua Jin thought that he had sacrificed his life for the sake of righteousness and should eat a piece of the donut he made. He didn't want the little guy to work so hard for nothing and feel disappointed. Although he knew that this donut would definitely taste terrible, he knew in his heart that it would definitely taste like wax when he saw Xiao Yichen's expression. However, he had to warm the little guy's heart. Hence, Hua Jin clenched his fists and made an important decision. When Xiao Yichen saw Hua Jin walking over, he was shocked. He desperately winked at Hua Jin, telling him not to touch Hua Jin's dark cuisine. However, Hua Jin didn't see it. Until Hua Jin stuffed a piece of donut into his mouth, boom, Hua Jin was shocked. Chapter 41:14. What was this taste? This feeling, it was as if his brain had been blown up by an atomic bomb. It was crispy on the inside and tender on the outside. It's so hard. Hua Jin had just uttered these two words when Gong Fan narrowed his eyes in alarm. Does it taste bad? No, Hua Jin used a Herculean effort to swallow that lump of black stuff. His entire mouth was filled with an inexplicable sandy texture and bitterness. It felt as if he had swallowed a mouthful of black soil. To be able to make a donut taste like this was also a skill. Hua Jin quickly corrected himself. It's so delicious that it's hard to describe. Gong Fan was stunned. At the side, Gong Jia and Xiao Yichen glanced at him in disdain. Was this PUBG? He could actually make such a big turn. Gong Fan was very smart. Even if he was initially fooled by Xiao Yichen's superb acting skills, he would still be able to tell that the donut tasted really bad. Hua Jin's words could lie, but his eyes and micro-expressions couldn't. In other words, no matter how good his acting skills were, he couldn't hide the fact that the donut tasted bad. Was it really that bad? He muttered in his heart and glanced at the black donut on the plate. He didn't believe it, so he took a piece and took a bite. Dong, he almost fell to the ground. Unspoken was frightened and hurried over to support him. Gong Fan struggled to support himself on the table and waved his hand gently to indicate that he was fine. However, when he turned around, Unspoken saw that his face was gloomy and full of disappointment. It tastes so bad, he had never eaten anything so disgusting. Although he didn't want to admit it, the donut tasted really bad. He emptied the entire plate of failed products into the bin expressionlessly. Everyone was silent. They didn't know whether to laugh or console him. Gong Fan sounded a little lonely. Is Yu's food delicious? Unspoken said helplessly, he's better at cooking. Oh. With a thud, Gong Fan's head drooped as low as it could go. It was obvious that he was utterly disappointed. He had a competitive personality and was unwilling to do anything worse than others. However, in this aspect, he really couldn't compare to Yu, so he felt a little sad. At the same time, he was somewhat unwilling. Yu was so outstanding that he dared not look her in the eye. He had made this donut very seriously and had even failed several times. But why did he still fail this time? Gong Fan felt inexplicably frustrated. Unspoken rubbed his head helplessly and said, "All right, don't be sad. Actually, it's not bad that you managed to do it for the first time. It was Mommy's first time cooking, and it didn't taste as good as yours. You're like Mommy in this aspect. Mommy doesn't seem to have any talent in this area." When Gong Fan heard this, the sadness in his heart eased a little. Really? Yes, really. So you see, when has Mommy ever cooked before? It's always Yu who cooks. Mommy doesn't know how to cook or make desserts. When Gong Fan heard this, he felt upset. I'll study it more next time. Who knows, I might have a talent for making desserts too. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he didn't know why, but he quivered. Chapter 41:15. Xiao Yichen quickly comforted him, actually, you don't have to. Look, if you're not good at cooking, you don't have to try it. Gong Fan was a little suspicious when he heard this. Why? Do you think I don't have talent in this area? Yes. However, Xiao Yichen did not dare to say it out loud. He only said vaguely, I think you're better than Yu in many aspects. For example? For example, didn't you come up with the Daoist project? I heard from my uncle that although the idea of the Daoist project is shocking, if it succeeds, Hurricane will control the global market. When Gong Fan heard this, he did not know why, but there was a hint of loneliness in his eyes. The so-called Daoist project is actually built on Yu's blueprints. Without his blueprints, even if I came up with this project, it would be a pipe dream. Xiao Yichen was speechless. But you're very good at business. But Yu's business philosophy is not worse than mine. Xiao Yichen was even more speechless. Gong Fan pursed his lips and said calmly, all of you, get out. I'll try again. Even if I don't make it into a dessert table, I'll make it into a donut. He did not want to disappoint Yu. He did not want him to think that he was useless. No matter what, he still wanted to give it a try. When Hua Jin and Gong Jie heard this, they looked at each other. Unspoken smiled faintly and said, if he wants to make it himself, why don't we let him try again? No matter what this child does, he always wants to finish what he started. Although she knew that cooking was also a matter of talent. She did not know how to cook and Mu Yaja was not very good at it either. However, Yu was a natural at cooking. She could only say that he was very talented in cooking and had a keen sense of smell when it came to food. This was something that they could not achieve. Whether it was genetic mutation or Yu's unique talent, cooking depended on one's intuition. Some people, even if they had never learned how to cook, could make anything taste good. Yu could even create many dishes that could not be found in restaurants all over the world. The four of them left the kitchen quietly. Gong Fan looked at the kitchen counter silently. In the end, he took a deep breath, rolled up his sleeves, and started from scratch. At the door, Natalia secretly pushed the door open and peeked through the gap. She saw a slender figure standing in front of the kitchen counter. She looked around and saw that he was the only one in the huge kitchen, so she tiptoed in. She quietly stood behind Gong Fan and quietly watched him stir the egg. Gong Fan was so focused on what he was doing that he did not realize that there was someone standing behind him. Natalia's footsteps were very light. No matter how sharp Gong Fan was, he did not notice her appearance for a moment. Until Natalia looked at the dessert that he hadn't finished making and asked curiously, "Did the dessert table fail today?" Gong Fan was shocked. He did not realize that there was someone beside him. He turned his head abruptly and saw that it was Natalia. He was a little surprised. You are?" Natalia opened her eyes and blinked slightly. There was some confusion in her gaze. "You forgot about me?" Gong Fan frowned and pondered for a moment. He quickly guessed her identity. Natalia. Chapter 41:16. Gong Fan took a deep look at Natalia. He was deeply attracted by her purple eyes. He had never seen purple eyes before. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Gong Fan couldn't help but fall into a daze and couldn't react for a moment. Natalia was also stunned. She immediately recognized that although the child in front of her had Yu's body, he wasn't Yu. She seemed to have heard that Yu had dual personality. Natalia carefully observed Gong Fan's somewhat unfamiliar expression and pouted slightly. "You're him, right?" Gong Fan was stunned and didn't understand what she meant. Natalia reminded him, "What's your name?" Gong Fan?" Gong Fan was shocked. "How do you know my name?" Natalia revealed a smug expression. "I heard Auntie Alice mention you before. One is Gong Fan, the other is Yu." Gong Fan saw that there was nowhere to hide his identity, so he said calmly, "Yes, it's me, I see." Natalia turned around with her back facing him. She closed her eyes and decided to tell him her secret. "Actually, I'm the same as you." Gong Fan was stunned for a moment and quickly understood what she meant. "You're also, yes. I have an older sister who looks exactly like me. Her name is Natalia Lisa. However, I've always been very afraid of her." "Why?" "She's very bad." Natalia furrowed her brows, her expression solemn. "She will hurt me and others. So, I'm very afraid of her. However, it's as if she lives in my body. I can't chase her away no matter how hard I try." When Gong Fan heard this, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he hesitated. He actually wanted to ask, between Natalia and Natalia, who was the main personality and who was the second personality. However, he opened his mouth and hesitated. In the end, he didn't say anything. "Sometimes, I'll see her in my dreams. She'll stand there and smile coldly at me. I'll feel afraid, but I can't move. At this time, I'll wake up covered in cold sweat." Gong Fan listened seriously. He was the only one who could fit into her world. Because he understood the world of dual personalities. Natalia turned around with her hands behind her back. She was wearing a dress and looked as cute as a doll. "However, sometimes, I would fall asleep. Once I fall asleep, it would always be for a very long time. My consciousness is clearly very happy, but my eyes are closed. No matter how hard I try, I can't open my eyes. Gong Fan also had such a resonance. I do that sometimes too. I'll sleep for a long time. No matter how hard I try to open my eyes, all I see is darkness. Natalia's voice suddenly turned cold. It feels like I'm dead. Gong Fan's body stiffened. Indeed, this feeling was no different from being a walking corpse. Do you know? Natalia asked him. I've had electroshock therapy before. Electroshock treatment? Gong Fan realized that the electroshock treatment she was talking about was the insane treatment plan that Xianxia had mentioned before. It used electric shocks to inflict pain on people. I know that Romanka wants to chase Natalia Lisa out of my body, but Natalia always hides in my body. I can only bear the pain. Chapter 41:17. Gong Fan was silent for a while before he suddenly asked curiously, have you heard of the land of death? Natalia turned around, her eyes glinting. Are you referring to the land of exile? The land of exile? Yes. I heard the patients in the hospital mention it before. For people like us, that place is destined to be our home. Natalia paused for a moment, and her gaze deepened. What's the difference between not being needed and being exiled? Gong Fan looked at her purple eyes and his heart suddenly palpitated. For some reason, he did not dare to look into her eyes. That pair of purple eyes seemed to have an indescribable magic. It was as if he looked at them for too long, he would be bewitched. Gong Fan turned around and did not look into her eyes anymore. Natalia curled her lips and walked to his side with her hands behind her back. Her voice suddenly became slow and lazy. Are you willing to be exiled? What? Do you want to go there? Gong Fan pursed his lips and suddenly said, I won't go there. Why? Natalia was a little puzzled. Are you so sure? They won't give up on me. You're the second personality, right? Natalia's words woke him up. Gong Fan's eyes regained focus and he said in surprise, how do you know that I'm the second personality? I see the same aura in you as mine. Natalia let out a crisp laugh. Uneasiness, confusion, and a kind of loneliness that comes from being afraid of being abandoned. Don't you feel that you've been abandoned? Natalia said, sometimes. Do you fall into a deep sleep for a long time? Gong Fan was shocked. Could it be, Natalia was the second personality? Natalia Lisa was the first personality? Gong Fan turned around in surprise and his gaze landed on Natalia. However, she suddenly reached out a finger and gently pressed it against her lips. Shoo. He watched as she raised a hand and stretched it in front of him. Her fingertips opened slightly and a pocket watch suddenly fell and gently swayed in front of him. It began to sway. Now, you don't have to think or see anything. You just have to close your eyes and listen to what you can hear. Natalia's words seemed to have some sort of magical power. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her cherry blossom-colored lips moved slightly as she spat out a few words with a languid tone. Did you hear that? Crack. 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 The sound of the pocket watches ticking suddenly drowned out all the noise. In that instant, all Gong Fan could hear was the sound of the needle turning. Crack. Crack. Gong Fan suddenly felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier. He tried his best to open his eyes, but his eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Gradually, he could no longer hold on. His eyelids gradually closed, and his world gradually fell into darkness. Daddy, Gong Jia and Hua Jin were sitting in the living room when they suddenly heard a kitten-like sound. Hua Jin stood up and saw Natalia leaning against the door. She said timidly, "It's you again, what's wrong?" Hua Jin saw that she had sneaked into the kitchen and was a little curious. Chapter 41:18. It's not like that, Natalia said hesitantly, it seems like, he suddenly fainted. What? While Hua Jin and Gong Jia were still stunned, Yun Shishir and Xiao Yichen did not have time to say a word. They stood up nervously and walked toward the kitchen. When they walked into the kitchen, they saw Gong Fan leaning against the wall and lying on the ground. His face was pale. Yun Shishir walked over uneasily, picked him up, and gently patted his face. Fan. Xiao Yichen saw that Gong Fan was unconscious and was scared out of his wits. Should we call an ambulance? Gong Jia and Hua Jin also walked in. When they saw the unconscious Gong Fan in Yun Shishir's arms, their expressions changed drastically. What's going on? Natalia followed them in. Hua Jin caught a glimpse of her from the corner of his eye and immediately asked her anxiously, what's going on? Why did he suddenly faint when he was fine just now? I don't know either, Natalia said innocently. When I walked in, I found him unconscious here. What should I do? Should I call an ambulance? Hua Jin was stunned. For some reason, the Natalia in front of him gave him a very unfamiliar feeling. It was as if he had never seen her before. She was different from the timid little girl who spoke cautiously when they first met. Even though her gaze seemed worried and uneasy, it was terrifyingly dark. Hua Jin was also aware that Natalia had dissociative identity disorder. Gong Jia had entrusted Natalia to him and told him about this in advance. However, no one had ever seen Natalia's second personality. Therefore, no one knew what Natalia's second personality was like. However, Hua Jin had an intuition that was even more terrifying than a sixth sense. The person in front of him was not Natalia at all. However, his guess seemed to have no evidence. Perhaps it was just his imagination running wild. Hua Jin's attention was still completely focused on Gong Fan. Xiao Yichen was about to take out his phone to call the ambulance when Yun Shishir noticed Gong Fan's eyelids twitching. She called out in delight, Fan? Gong Fan hummed softly and finally opened his eyes. Seeing that he was awake, Yun Shishir finally heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed her brows. Are you feeling unwell? Gong Fan was still in a daze. His vision gradually overlapped and regained focus. Only then did he see the person in front of him clearly. He called out softly, Mommy. She sounded so weak that anyone who heard it couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Yun Shishir said worriedly, You suddenly fainted. What happened? Are you feeling unwell? Gong Fan looked around. When he heard Yun Shishir say that he had fainted, he was a little surprised. Did I faint just now? Yun Shishir said, You gave us a fright. Gong Fan was also a little confused. He had no impression of what had happened just now. He only remembered that when he was still making desserts, he suddenly felt dizzy and fainted instantly. I don't know what happened either. Gong Fan supported his body gently and held his forehead. Probably, I didn't sleep well last night. He didn't know how to explain it and could only make up a random reason to stop Yun Shishir from worrying. Chapter 41:19. Didn't sleep well? Even if she didn't sleep well, she wouldn't have fainted. However, no one knew what had happened to him. The doctor couldn't find anything even if they went to the hospital. Ever since Yu returned, Yun Shishir knew that Yu had been trying to get along with Yu peacefully. However, just as Alice said, with two personalities coexisting, Yu would not be able to hold on any longer. Yun Shishir didn't know what he meant by not being able to hold on. However, seeing Gong Fan suddenly faint, it was hard for her not to link the two together. If you're tired, go back to your room and rest for a while, okay? Gong Fan nodded gently, but he was a little reluctant. Will I fall asleep and sleep for a few days? Yun Shishir understood what he meant. He was worried that if he fell asleep, the next time he woke up might be a few days later. Yun Shishir's heart ached for him, so she comforted him gently, then. Mommy will stay with you, okay? Just lie on the bed. Mommy won't leave, okay? Gong Fan nodded his head lightly. Yun Shishir carried Gong Fan and stood up. Gong Fan had grown taller and heavier, so it wasn't as easy to carry him as before. Xiao Yichen supported him a little. With the man in her arms, Unspoken turned around and said guiltily, "I'm sorry, Natalia. Today, he's not feeling well. We'll talk about the dessert counter later, but since he promised to cook for you, he'll definitely keep his promise. But today..." Natalia was stunned and hurriedly said, "It's okay. If he's not feeling well, he can lie on the bed for a while." "Okay." Unspoken carried Gong Fan to the bedroom. Hua Jin said, "I'll go get 2 cups of hot water and send them to the room." Gong Jie nodded. "Go ahead." In the bedroom, Unspoken gently placed Gong Fan on the bed and covered him with the blanket. Just as she was about to get up to draw the curtains, Gong Fan thought that she was going to leave and nervously tugged at her clothes. When Unspoken saw this, she laughed involuntarily and said softly, "Mommy is going to draw the curtains. Don't leave, okay?" Only then did Gong Fan release his fingers in relief. Unspoken drew the curtains and immediately returned to the bedside. When she saw Gong Fan's gaze on her, she knew that he was afraid that she would accidentally fall asleep, so she secretly left. She was clear in her heart. Gong Fan's dependence on her was even greater than Yuyu's on her. She took off her coat and crawled under the blankets. Hugging him, she coaxed, "You don't believe Mommy's words?" "Of course, Mommy said I won't leave and will stay here with you." "I feel like you don't believe me." Gong Fan bit his lips and did not say anything. Unspoken gently pinched the tip of his nose and said helplessly, "Mommy doesn't mean to blame you. I just feel that if you're tired, you can close your eyes and sleep peacefully. If you don't want to sleep, you can close your eyes. Mommy will accompany you." "Mommy, yes? I want to hear you sing." Gong Fan paused and immediately said, "It's okay if you don't sing. Talk to me." When Unspoken heard this, she asked, "What song do you want to listen to?" "Anything is fine." He didn't know why, but all of a sudden, he was extremely tired. He really wanted to sleep, but he couldn't sleep well. If he listened to her voice, it would probably be better. That was what he thought. Chapter 41:20. Outside the door, Xiao Yichen stood at the door. Through the gap, he saw Unspoken hugging Gong Fan in the bedroom. He frowned and turned around with a grave expression. Hua Jin stood behind him with 2 glasses of water in his hands. He lowered his voice and asked, "How is he? Has he fallen asleep?" Xiao Yichen shook his head. "I can't see clearly, but Mommy is coaxing him to sleep." Then, Hua Jin looked at the 2 glasses of water in his hands. "Should I bring this in?" "Don't. We don't want to disturb little brother." "Okay." Hua Jin turned around and placed the glasses of water on the cabinet. His expression was grave. Gong Fan's sudden fainting was not a small matter. Why would something like this happen out of the blue? Has he been like this in the past? Hua Jin couldn't help but ask. Little Yichen shook his head. "No, I don't." Then, Xiao Yichen continued, "Little brother has never fainted out of the blue. Although he wasn't in good health in the past, this has never happened before." Gong Jie walked over and peeked through the gap in the door. When he saw the mother and son lying on the bed, he was relieved and gently closed the door. Let him sleep for a while. Hua Jin knew that Gong Jie was very knowledgeable. He asked worriedly, "Is he all right?" Gong Jie glanced at him with disdain. "How would I know?" "All right," he had asked for nothing. "I also feel that there is something unusual about him fainting this time." Gong Jie paused and said, "I'll ask Alice later. We can't jump to conclusions now." "Okay." After Gong Jie and Xiao Yichen walked away, Hua Jin turned around and suddenly saw a slender figure standing at the door of another room not far away. He focused his gaze and saw that it was Natalia. He saw her leaning against the door and secretly looking over. When she realized that Hua Jin was looking at her, she was obviously stunned. She did not think that she would be discovered, so she quickly closed the door. Hua Jin frowned and narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Natalia's second personality? Gong Jie held the glass of water and his expression froze for a moment. I have never seen it before. I feel that Natalia is a little strange today. Also, didn't you say that she has a split personality? I don't think I've seen her second personality. Gong Jie became suspicious when he heard that. Now that you mention it, I did forget that she has dual personality disorder. Gong Fan is Yu Yu's second personality, Yu Yu is the main personality, and Gong Fan is the second personality. If Natalia is the main personality, what is the name of the second personality? You're still here now. After you leave, if her second personality appears, a completely unfamiliar personality, I won't be able to handle it. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows. Are you that reliant on me? Hua Jin felt extremely awkward when he heard such ambiguous words. Don't misinterpret my meaning. Gong Jie said, who is the one misinterpreting whose meaning? Hua Jin was speechless again. This man always seemed to have the ability to twist the truth. Xiao Yichen understood what Hua Jin meant. You're worried that Natalia's second personality is not a good person? You've never seen Natalia's second personality, right? Chapter 41-21. Hua Jin said this because he felt that Natalia was too strange today. Gong Fan had been fine in the kitchen, but after she walked in, he fainted for no reason. What was even more frightening was that he inadvertently caught a glimpse of Natalia's face as she looked at Gong Fan. There was an indescribable coldness. It made him feel a little unfamiliar. Gong Jie felt a little helpless. He had already stayed here for too long. If he delayed any longer, he was afraid that hurricane would become a pot of porridge. Hua Jin saw the hesitation on his face and immediately said, actually, it's okay if you don't stay. I'll try my best to deal with it. I'll send someone to take good care of her. If there's anything unusual, just tell me directly. Hua Jin nodded. Okay, got it. Yunshusher was originally accompanying Gong Fan to sleep. She hummed softly and unknowingly, little Munchkin in her arms couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell into a deep sleep. Seeing that he had fallen asleep, she wanted to get up, but she was worried that Gong Fan would be sad and disappointed when he woke up and didn't see her by his side. Hence, she decided to sleep with him. When she woke up again, she was startled awake by the sound of someone turning around beside her. She instinctively opened her eyes and saw that little Munchkin was already awake. She was about to call out Gong Fan when she saw him rubbing his eyes and opening them. His slightly dazed gaze made Yunshusher realize that the person who had woken up wasn't Gong Fan, but Yu Yu. Yu Yu, you're awake? Yunshusher patted his face gently. Yu Yu opened his eyes and was still in a daze for a while. He was in a daze because when he fell asleep yesterday, it was at night in his own house. When he woke up, he was already in an unfamiliar room. He was very smart and realized that he had been in a deep sleep for some time. The person who had woken up previously was Gong Fan. Yu Yu's voice was still hoarse from when he had just woken up. Where am I? At Natalia's house. How many days has it been since I fell asleep? Today is the day we agreed to make a dessert table for Natalia. Have you forgotten? However, the person who woke up this morning was Gong Fan. It's understandable that you don't remember him. Ah, Yu Yu smacked her head. What time is it now? It's already past noon. I've already asked her for leave. Why? Yu Yu paused and immediately reacted. Oh, I forgot. Gong Fan doesn't know how to make desserts. He tried to do it for you today. Perhaps he felt that since you agreed to it, even if it was him, he couldn't go against the agreement. So, he bit the bullet and tried it, Yunshusher explained. When Yu Yu heard this, she couldn't help but feel helpless. Why would he do that? Yes, I failed several times. Yunshushu pondered for a moment. In the morning, Gong Fan suddenly fainted once. I thought that he didn't sleep well, so I coaxed him to sleep for a while. When Yu heard this, he nodded and felt a little warm in his heart. He also realized that when he opened his eyes just now, Yunshushu was stunned for a moment, but she still recognized that he was not Gong Fan, but Yu. He felt warm in his heart. Chapter 41-22. In the past, when he stood next to Xiao Yichen, many people would mistake him for Xiao Yichen. Only Yunshushu could always tell the difference between the two little guys at a glance. However, now, only Yunshushu could tell the difference between him and Gong Fan. Touched, Yu hugged Yunshushu's shoulders and kissed her forehead gently. "Mommy, I love you." "Okay." Yunshushu hugged him gently. "Are you still sleepy? Do you want to sleep for a while more?" "I'm not sleepy. I just want to hug mommy like this." As Yu spoke, he gently snuggled his little head into her embrace. Yunshushu couldn't help but chide him. "You're already so old, yet you're still so clingy to mommy. Do you still want to get a wife in the future? A wife is as important as mommy." "Oh. Our Yu is really a mommy's boy. In the future, you're not allowed to stick to mommy like this. Otherwise, girls won't like mommy's boy." Yu pouted and said, "Is it wrong for me to love mommy? If what mommy says and does is right, why shouldn't I listen to mommy? When you grow up, will you still stick to mommy like this?" Yu thought for a while and said seriously, "It depends on the situation. If mommy becomes senile, I definitely won't listen to mommy." Yunshushu's heart ached. "When you grow up, mommy won't become senile either." When Yu heard this, he laughed. "Okay. Mommy is so young. When I'm 30, mommy will only be 48 years old." Yunshushu was angry and amused at the same time. She rubbed his head and said comfortingly, "Close your eyes and rest for a while." Yu grunted and obediently hugged Yunshushu's waist and closed his eyes. "Mommy, I feel that it's very strange. Recently, Gong Fan always seems to sleep for a long time without waking up." When Yunshushu heard this, she knew that Yu was worried about Gong Fan. She comforted her gently, "Isn't that good? At the very least, you'll have more time for mommy to accompany you." But, Yu couldn't bear it. He said sadly, "If that's the case, won't he have less time to see mommy? He's actually lonelier than I am, and he needs company more. Subconsciously, I also want to give this body to him so that he can spend more time with mommy, but, he's been acting weird lately. He always sleeps for a long time." Yunshushu couldn't help but hesitate. She also realized that Yu had discovered some minor changes in her body. He was a little afraid of these changes, and she was also scared witless. However, no matter what happened, she wanted to be by his side and would be by his side. "Don't think too much. No matter what, you can't change anything even if you let your imagination run wild. You just need to know that no matter what happens, mommy will be by your side." When Yu heard this, he smiled and said, "Okay." Yu hugged Yunshushu and stayed in bed for a while. He only got up when he was no longer sleepy. At that moment, Huajin had already reheated the food. At noon, except for the two of them, everyone else had eaten. It was only then that Yunshushu realized that it was already 2 in the afternoon, but she didn't feel hungry at all. Chapter 41-23. Seeing that Yunshushu was asking about Natalia, Huajin replied, "Yeah, Natalia is taking an afternoon nap. Kids don't have energy if they don't take an afternoon nap." Yu looked at Yunshushu and then at Huajin. Seeing that the two of them had different expressions, she didn't know what they were thinking about. Huajin sized up Yu and carefully probed, "You are, idiot, I'm Yu." Yu rolled her eyes adorably. "Can't you recognize me?" Huajin answered honestly, I really can't recognize you." "Huh. Yu glanced in the direction of the bedroom, pursed his lips and said, that guy must have made a mess in the kitchen, right? Everyone could tell that the clumsy guy he was referring to was Gong Fan. When Hua Jin heard this, he immediately said, I've already tidied up the kitchen. But Natalia seems very disappointed that she didn't get to eat dessert. It's okay. Yu moved her wrists and smiled at Hua Jin. I'll get the dessert table ready right away. You don't have to force yourself. Since I've promised, I have to do it. Besides, it's okay. I'm not that clumsy guy. With that, Yu walked into the kitchen. Yunshishir said to Gong Jia and Hua Jin, I'll go and help him. Hua Jin couldn't help but tease her, I feel that you might not be helping him. You might even cause trouble. When Yunshishir heard this, she was instantly unhappy. Are you looking down on me? Gong Jia couldn't help but say, sis, don't go and cause trouble. Everyone knows that you'll cause more trouble than help when you enter the kitchen. Yunshishir's face turned red. She was angry and embarrassed. All right. She could only sit down on the sofa obediently. In the afternoon, when it was almost evening, Yu gently placed the last decorative flower on the cake in the kitchen. With that, the dessert counter was successfully completed. Coincidentally, Natalia had just woken up from her afternoon nap. As soon as she walked out of her room, she smelled a sweet fragrance. She couldn't help but follow the aroma to the dining room, only to find that there was a huge dessert table by the dining table. On top, there were biscuits, donuts, small cakes. They were all pink, exquisite and beautiful. Natalia's eyes widened in shock. She didn't expect the dessert table to be completed. This was probably a beautiful surprise. You're awake? A voice came from behind. Natalia turned around in confusion. She saw Yu standing behind her with his hands behind his back and a warm smile on his face. Do you like it? You did this? Yu nodded. Okay. Natalia muttered to herself doubtfully for a moment and tried to sound out a name. Yu? For some reason, Yu suddenly froze. He suddenly asked, have you seen him before? Him he was referring to was Gong Fan. Natalia understood what he meant and nodded. The one in the morning wasn't you. It was him, right? Yu nodded. For some reason, his expression changed. He doesn't know how to make desserts. Chapter 41-24. Yu was still puzzled. He suddenly asked, how do you know about him? Natalia was stunned. Indeed, no one had mentioned Gong Fan to her. Even Gong Jia and Hua Jin had never mentioned Yu's double identity disorder to her. Natalia pursed her lips and immediately said, I can tell that you're like me, right? Yu narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at her deeply. However, he did not say anything in the end. Instead, he hid the suspicion in his eyes and changed the topic. He turned around and asked, do you like the dessert table I made? Natalia walked over slowly and looked at the desserts on the dessert rack. She asked happily, can I eat it now? This is a gift I made for you. It depends on whether you're willing to try it. Yu was a gentleman. His every word and action were like that of a noble son who had been educated in etiquette. Natalia said sweetly, of course. I love desserts the most. As she spoke, she carefully picked up a donut and couldn't wait to put it into her mouth. Yu looked at her quietly. There was no trace of emotion on his face. It was as if he was only concerned about whether she liked the dessert he made. Is it good? Yes. Is it as good as the one you ate at the amusement park last time? Natalia said, this must be the best dessert I've ever had in the world. There's no other dessert like it. She asked curiously, have you learned how to bake before? No. I read books and tried to make it myself. So good? Natalia blushed again and said, if I want to eat it again in the future, will you still be willing to make it for me? Of course. If you want to eat it, I can make it any time. Okay, then it's a deal. Natalia smiled and took a bite of the donut. She wanted to try all the desserts on the dessert rack before she stopped. Yu looked at her without a trace. His gaze fell on her face, but there was no change in his expression. After dinner, Yu and Yunshishir went home. As for the Gongjia, it was the evening schedule. After dinner, he gave a few instructions to Hua Jin and left. Before they left, Natalia was still reluctant to leave. She hugged him and refused to leave. Hua Jin stood by the side and watched. Gongjia naturally couldn't bear to part with her, so she coaxed her gently and promised that she would come back as soon as possible. Only then did Natalia let go of her hand and let her go. Even after Gongjia had left for a long time, Natalia was still standing by the window. Under the cold moonlight, the side of her face seemed to be covered with a layer of silver. After finishing a glass of champagne, Hua Jin finally stood up and walked to Natalia's side. All of a sudden, he reached out and gently closed the window. Natalia looked up at him in surprise. Hua Jin said slowly, "It's getting cold. The wind is too strong. Don't catch a cold." Oh. Natalia couldn't hide the disappointment in her eyes. She turned around and walked back to her room dejectedly. Hua Jin looked at her back in silence. Finally, he couldn't suppress the suspicion in his heart. He took a deep breath and suddenly spoke. "Who are you?" His voice was very soft. Even if a needle fell to the ground, it would be able to drown out his voice. However, Natalia heard it very clearly. Her back stiffened. Chapter 41-25. Who am I? Natalia was obviously amused by his question. She turned around gracefully, her skirt fluttering in a beautiful arc. She smiled with her hands behind her back, as cute as a doll. "I'm Natalia. You know my name." Hua Jin took a step closer to her and asked seriously again, "Who are you?" Natalia was not stunned, nor did she find his question strange. Instead, she sized him up with a smile. She suddenly took a step closer to him. "You're so interesting." Hua Jin pursed his lips. Now, there were only two people in front of him. There was no one else. Hua Jin voiced all the doubts in his heart. "You don't seem to be Natalia." Natalia smiled but did not say anything. "Oh? Why?" "You're deliberately imitating her, but you can't imitate her temperament. Natalia is very elegant and polite, but she doesn't like to talk. She's afraid of strangers, but she's very careful. You, on the other hand, don't fit in with her at all." Although Hua Jin had only spent a few days with Natalia, he knew that she was too simple-minded. She was as simple as a piece of unpolished jade without any decorations. Simple and easy to understand. So much so that after spending a few days with her, Hua Jin naturally understood her habits and personality characteristics. Moreover, he was a very sensitive person. Therefore, he could easily tell that the person in front of him was not Natalia. "I heard that Natalia has two personalities." Hua Jin said seriously, "One is called Natalia, but the other one, no one knows until now." "So, who are you?" Natalia looked at him with a smile and did not answer directly. Instead, she said lightly, "Natalia has two personalities. One is called Natalia." She walked softly to the window. She did not look at Hua Jin. Instead, she looked at the fog on the window and looked at the bright moon through the window. The moon was as bright as frost. Pouring into the windowsill, there was an inexplicable sense of coldness. She gently placed her hands on the window and lowered her eyes. The moonlight flowed down along her eyelashes. There was an indescribable elegance, but at the same time, indifference. Natalia doesn't like to talk. She's timid and afraid of strangers, but she draws very well. She likes to sing and listen to other people sing. She has no sense of security, so she trusts others easily and gets hurt easily. After a pause, she used her fingertips to elegantly draw on the window. Her dark red lips actually had a touch of flirtatious beauty. Like a fairy. It also looked like an elf. So, she gradually learned to protect herself and stopped trusting others easily. That's why she doesn't have any friends, but she does have friends. I'm her friend. You're her friend? Hua Jin frowned and asked suspiciously, you. What's your name? Could it be Natalia's other personality? Natalia looked back at him and narrowed her eyes slightly. Hua Jin's tone became gentle. It was not intentional, but he felt that the Natalia in front of him seemed to be a little wary and guarded. He seemed to have interpreted it wrongly and thought that she was insecure. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Chapter 41:26. She suddenly tiptoed. Even though she was not wearing a dance dress or shoes, the moment she tiptoed, the back of her foot straightened up and she stood up like a swan. She glanced at Hua Jin from the corner of her eye. She twirled her steps slightly and the hem of her dress fluttered like a butterfly's wings. She dances very well. I think she has a talent in this area. Even if she doesn't have a teacher to teach her, she looks very good when she dances. In the dead of the night, she likes to stand on the balcony of the hospital, facing the wind like a swan. Natalia slowly stretched out the tip of her foot and stepped lightly on the floor. It was light, but it was as if the tip of her foot was touching the surface of a river. There were no ripples. Her dance steps were light and graceful. It was so elegant that it was hard to take one's eyes off her. Hua Jin furrowed his eyebrows slightly. He probed, so, you're Natalisa, her second personality? Natalia turned around and looked at him deeply. Suddenly, her lips curled into a smile. There was a hint of contempt in her smile. She asked slowly, who told you that she has dual personality? Hua Jin was stunned. He did not know what she meant by that. Natalia did not have dual personality? Then, the girl in front of him. Was she Natalia or Natalisa? Who? Who are you? The girl smiled. There was a hint of evil in her eyes. I'm not Natalia, and I'm not Natalisa. I'm the emissary. Emissary? Hua Jin was even more confused. Emissary, what was that? His tone was a little heavy. Who are you? I'm in charge of managing this body. The girl lowered her head and looked at her hand. She raised it gently and examined it elegantly. She smiled. I can see them, but they can't see me. I'm the emissary created by Professor Romanka. I'm in charge of maintaining the balance between the personalities. If any of the personalities are disobedient, I have the right to chase them to the land of exile. Hua Jin's eyes revealed a hint of shock. It was not because of what she said, but because of the coldness that flashed in her eyes. It made one's blood run cold. Does the Gong Jia know about this? Then, where's Alice? Did she know the truth about Natalia? What did Romanka do to this girl? What emissary? Hua Jin was a little confused. I don't understand what you mean. He wondered if he should call Alice later and ask her what a messenger meant. The girl obviously saw through his thoughts and said, You want to call Alice? Hua Jin was a little wary. Did this girl have the ability to read minds? Otherwise, how could she see through his thoughts so easily? He said, You, don't let your imagination run wild. Do you know Alice? I know her. The girl's expression suddenly turned cold. I'm warning you, don't ruin my plan. Do you understand? Ruin your plan? Hua Jin was a little alarmed. What plan? Oh. You want to know so badly? The girl suddenly walked in front of him with her hands behind her back. Her eyes were as cold as the moonlight. You shouldn't know so much. Otherwise, it's very dangerous. Very dangerous? Very dangerous? Chapter 41-27. Hua Jin didn't know why, but he seemed to have sensed too many things from her eyes. He immediately took a step back. Just as he turned around, he heard a strange cry of pain behind him. "Ah! Don't come over." Hua Jin was shocked and hurriedly turned around. He didn't know why the girl was kneeling on the ground, her hands cupping her ears. "Don't come over." Hua Jin was at a loss for what to do when he heard her hysterical screams. "What's wrong?" He immediately went forward and held her shoulders. He was so worried that he didn't know where to go. "What's wrong with you? Why don't you come over? Did you see anything?" She covered her ears tightly, her whole body trembling violently. "Don't talk. Don't talk in my ear. Go away, go away. They're all bad people. Bad people." Hua Jin was scared out of his wits. He didn't know what happened to her body, but he was worried that something was wrong with her. He comforted her gently, I'm here, I'm here. Don't be afraid. Look at me, the girl suddenly raised her head. At the same time, almost at the same time, she raised her right hand. Immediately, a pocket watch dangled from her palm. Click, the surroundings suddenly became extremely quiet, leaving only the sound of the pocket watch's hands moving. Click, click, it was clear and rhythmic. Hua Jin subconsciously looked at the pocket watch dangling in front of his eyes. Because of this pocket watch, his vision seemed to be blended together and gradually became blurry. He tried to calm his mind and look away. However, his eyes seemed to be firmly attracted by the pocket watch and there was no room for him to retreat. This pocket watch seemed to have magical powers. However, the little bit of consciousness he had left seemed to remind him. This seemed to be hypnotism. He originally thought that this kind of hypnotism seemed to only be seen in movies and novels. He didn't expect that this kind of hypnotism actually existed in reality. What's your name? The girl asked. Hua Jin said numbly, Rong Jin. What's my name? Messenger. Wrong, the girl's voice became softer and softer, like a feather. My name is Natalia. There is no emissary, nor is there a Natalia. Soon, I will snap my fingers. After hearing this sound, you will forget everything you heard, everything you should have heard, and everything you shouldn't have heard. You just had a very long dream. When you wake up from the dream, everything will return to reality. What I said will no longer exist. Hua Jin's eyes gradually became hollow. In his eyes, the constantly swinging pocket watch was reflected. The girl looked at his expression and suddenly put away her pocket watch. She reached out and snapped her fingers. Patter. Hua Jin's eyelids suddenly drooped powerlessly. His entire body suddenly lost its support, and he softly fainted on the ground, unconscious. The girl squatted beside him and looked at him quietly. After waiting for a long time, she hugged his shoulders and dragged him to the sofa with great effort. She helped him onto the sofa. She took a deep breath, then suddenly stood up and walked downstairs. Downstairs, the nanny was cleaning. Auntie. She called out softly. The nanny's attention was attracted. She looked up and saw that it was her. She asked curiously, Young miss, is there anything? Chapter 41-28. Aya, how could this be? The nanny immediately put down her work and hurried upstairs. When she saw Hua Jin lying on the sofa, looking like he had fallen asleep, she couldn't help but sigh. You must be exhausted. How did you fall asleep on the sofa? The nanny nagged as she walked forward and gently pushed Hua Jin's shoulder. Young master, young master. Hua Jin didn't move at all. The nanny was suspicious and shook him a little harder. Hua Jin woke up abruptly. He opened his eyes and felt a terrible headache. His brain felt empty, and he didn't realize where he was. Natalia saw the confusion in his eyes and realized that her hypnosis had worked. She sighed in relief. Hypnosis was all about coordination. If a person was extremely resistant and repulsed before being hypnotized, especially when he was so alert just now, as if he had guessed what she was going to do, the hypnosis could easily fail. She didn't expect it to work. She took a deep breath and immediately smiled. She pretended to be careful and said, "Uncle, are you tired? How did you fall asleep on the sofa?" Hua Jin's gaze was a little confused. He also didn't know why he was lying on the sofa for no reason. His memory was still stuck at the time when Gong Jie left. How did he end up lying here in the blink of an eye? What had happened in between that he didn't realize at all? Hua Jin was a little confused. "Why am I here? You said you were tired and wanted to sit for a while. You didn't expect to fall asleep on the sofa." Natalia paused and explained, "I didn't want to wake you up, but the weather is getting colder. I was worried that you would catch a cold, so I wanted to wake you up and go back to your room to sleep." Hua Jin was still a little confused when he heard this. Then why did he lose a part of his memory for no reason? What had happened between them? How could he have forgotten all about it? "Maybe you're sleepy and tired?" Natalia said. "If you're tired, go back to your room and sleep. It's getting late. Go to bed early." As she spoke, she yawned. "I feel sleepy too. I'm going back to my room to rest. Good night." Hua Jin nodded, but he was still in a daze. His head felt empty. He didn't like this feeling. It was as if he had lost his memory. At that moment, he seemed to understand why Yu had once told him that the memories of the two personalities were always blank and how painful it was. It was as if he had lost his memory. Hua Jin gently hit his head and racked his brain for a while, but he couldn't remember what had happened. So, he stood up and grabbed his coat. The nanny saw that something was wrong with his expression and asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" "I don't feel well." Hua Jin said weakly, "I'm tired. I want to rest early." "All right. Then young master, rest early. Good night." And Hua Jin walked towards the bedroom. The nanny looked at his back view hesitantly. Just now, she stood at the top of the stairs and vaguely heard the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. She wanted to go up and take a look, but she didn't. She didn't know what had happened, but she felt that. Chapter 41-29. Gong Fan had become very strange recently. He couldn't put his finger on it, but one day, the time he slept became longer and longer, and the time he was awake became less and less. It was as if he was on the verge of disappearing. Yu found it very strange. He didn't deliberately suppress him. However, the time Gong Fan woke up became more and more unpredictable. Yu didn't know what happened to make him like this. Gong Fan hasn't been online for a long time. Lying on his stomach on the bed, little Ichen rested his head on his hands and complained to Yu. "So much so that no one plays games with me." Xiao Ichen had been obsessed with a game recently. It was an FPS shooting game. Yu couldn't remember the name of the game, but the background of the game seemed to be on a deserted island. There were a total of 100 players who jumped onto the island in the form of parachutes. There were all kinds of vehicles, guns, and explosives on the island. The player who survived to the end would obtain supreme glory. Gong Jie was the first to play this game. Later, Xiao Yichen followed suit and started to play with Gong Jie. In the end, Gong Jie thought that he was a scammer. Xiao Yichen's marksmanship was top-notch in real life, but in the game, he was a scammer. This game wasn't a game that could be played well simply by having good marksmanship. The most important thing was to have dynamic vision, insight, and even hearing. The opponent could be hiding in the corner, on the roof, or behind the sofa. The one who discovered the enemy first had a chance of winning. Gong Jie didn't want to play with Xiao Yichen, so he made an excuse and said that he only wanted to play with 4 people. If Xiao Yichen could gather 4 people, he would play with Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen coaxed and pestered Mu Yaja to play with Gong Fan. Gong Fan didn't play much. Gong Jia couldn't go online to play all the time because of work. Thus, when Gong Fan was around, Xiao Yichen would play with him. When Gong Fan wasn't around, he would pester Mu Yaja to play with him. Gong Fan was surprisingly good at this game. Most importantly, he was patient and had a steady state of mind. In a calm state, he could hunt his opponents gracefully and calmly. Xiao Yichen loved playing with him. Gong Fan's insight was extremely shocking. Once he discovered an enemy, he would also report the exact location to Xiao Yichen. Therefore, as long as Gong Jia was around, Xiao Yichen would abandon Mu Yaja and Gong Jia without hesitation and hug his younger brother's thigh tightly. However, Gong Fan had not been online for a while, so Xiao Yichen muttered. Not being able to play the game was a small matter, but Xiao Yichen was vaguely worried that something had happened to Gong Fan. Yu saw Xiao Yichen lying on the bed in boredom. He was staring at the screen of his phone with his mouth behind his back. On the screen was a picture of the battle results. He had just lost the game and was feeling depressed. His mentality was a little explosive. Yu was speechless. I see that you've been addicted to playing games recently. Mommy said that if you continue to be so addicted, she'll consider cutting off your internet connection. It's impossible to cut off my internet connection unless he cuts off the internet connection for the whole family. It's impossible to cut off the internet connection, but it's not impossible to confiscate your phone. Xiao Yichen glanced at him and opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Yu saw that he obviously had something to ask and snorted. You seem to have something to say. Chapter 41:30. He lay on his stomach on the bed and propped his head up with his hands. I haven't seen Gong Fan for a long time. Is he sick? If he's sick, I'll be sick too. Then, Xiao Yichen couldn't think of any other reason. He sighed and said, I'm just a little worried. Are you really worried? Or are you bored because there's no one to play games with? Xiao Yichen looked aggrieved when he heard this. Am I that kind of person? I'm really worried, okay? You're my younger brother, and he's also my biological younger brother. Isn't it natural for an older brother to be worried about his younger brother? I thought you didn't want to see him since you were so afraid of him. Xiao Yichen smiled guiltily. Actually, it's not that bad. At first, I wasn't used to his personality. I felt that he was too cold. However, after interacting with him for a while, I felt that he was just cold on the outside. To be precise, he was just using his coldness to protect himself from getting hurt. I feel that he must be someone who lacks a sense of security. That's why he doesn't want anyone to walk into his heart so easily. Yu rubbed his head and said, all right, don't let your imagination run wild. Play your game. Xiao Yichen rested his head on his chest and looked at him innocently with his big, watery eyes. Are you playing? Yu glanced at him coldly. To put it bluntly, you want me to play games with you. Xiao Yichen blinked his eyes in a flattering manner. Let's play together. This game is really fun. Even Gong Fan is a little addicted to it. Daddy has been playing it whenever he's free. What game? Chicken. Chicken, Yu thought that he had heard wrongly. What do you want to eat? Chicken. Yu thought for a moment. He couldn't help but imagine a scene in his mind. On a patch of green grass, a large minion was eating a chicken. It sounded like a childish game. It sounds so boring. Actually, chicken dinner is just a nickname. The real name of this game is PlayerUnknown's Battleground. PUBG? Yes. It's just fun. I have an account. I'll lend it to you. Yu muttered, I don't know how to play this game. If you don't know, I can teach you first. It's very simple and easy to learn. It's just that it's a little difficult to get first place. Anyway, once you start playing, don't think about getting chicken dinner. Just think about how to familiarize yourself with the controls. Without hesitation, Xiao Yichen dragged Yu Yu into his study room and pushed him in front of the computer. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen each had a different study room. Originally, there were only 2 study rooms. One was for Mu Yaja's personal use and the other was for Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen to share. In fact, it was not a problem for the 2 of them to share a study room. Yu Yu used the study room more. Xiao Yichen did not use the study room much other than doing his homework. Later on, Xiao Yichen started playing games. Hence, he asked for a study room of his own. Coincidentally, there was an empty room on the 2nd floor. After some decorations, it became his personal study room. Compared to Yu Yu's study room, Xiao Yichen's study room was renovated later on. Hence, it was full of technological vibes. It was all intelligent systems. Intelligent curtains, intelligent doors and windows, intelligent stereo, intelligent bookshelves. Chapter 41-31. As soon as Xiao Yichen opened the door, he instructed the artificial intelligence, close the curtains. After a second of reaction, the curtains slowly closed by themselves. Turn on the lights. The lights turned on with a pop sound. Then, Yu Yu saw 3 supercomputers. They were called supercomputers because these 3 computers were equipped with gaming equipment such as keyboards, mice, speakers, and earbuds. They were all the best equipment available on the market. It was said that Xiao Yichen had taken this study out of his New Year's money account. It was also said that Xiao Yichen's New Year's money account was at least a 9-figure sum. These pieces of equipment were nothing to him. Yu Yu sat down on the computer chair curiously. This computer chair had a massage function. At the same time, it was built according to ergonomic standards to prevent cervical and lumbar spine problems caused by prolonged gaming. Sitting on it, he felt that his whole body was surrounded. It was indeed very comfortable. Yu Yu frowned. Where's the display? Wait a minute. Xiao Yichen pressed a button. After a while, the display shelf slowly lowered from above his head. There were a total of 3 displays on the shelf. The one in the middle was a curved screen. For the sake of playing a game, little Yichen would use the best configuration no matter what. Xiao Yichen helped him log into the game account. Yu Yu was confused throughout. This is the European server. It's a European server. However, there are still many players in China. Xiao Yichen explained the rules of the game to him. Do you know about mercenaries? Yes. There are 100 players participating in each game. The players' characters are mercenaries. They parachute to every corner of the island and look for weapons, vehicles, and supplies with their bare hands. They also fight in various terrains. To win, strategy and marksmanship are equally important. In each game, the safe zone will be changed randomly. The weapons and items obtained in each zone will appear randomly. If you can survive until the end, you will win. In other words, the other 99 players are losers, said the boy in a low voice. You could say that. Then why is this game called Chicken Dinner? Winner winner chicken dinner, have you heard of it? Yes, I have. That's a saying from a Las Vegas casino. A long time ago, every LAS the casinos in Vegas had a rice dish that consisted of 3 pieces of chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. The standard reward for winning a bet was, so if you won once, you would have enough money to buy a chicken rice dish. If you get first place in this game, that's what you'll get. In other words, you'll get chicken dinner tonight. That's how the nickname came about. Oh. However, not every player can be so lucky to get chicken dinner. Yu Yu asked, is Gong Fan very good at this game? Super awesome. Xiao Yichen had a look of disbelief on his face. Every time I get a chicken dinner, it's because he brought me to play. I remember that when he played games, his marksmanship was not as good as yours. Chapter 41-32. As Yu Yu listened, he recalled the words that Gong Fan left in his notebook. I don't want to play games with Xiao Yichen anymore. He's always dragging me down. How can he be so stupid? Moreover, this game is so boring. It's a waste of time. Yu wondered what Xiao Yichen would do if he knew what Gong Fan said about him. Don't you think that you're playing very badly? Xiao Yichen blushed. He did not look at him directly. Instead, he walked to the side awkwardly and said softly, I think, my skills are okay. This game is not easy to begin with. It's already not easy for me to play it like this. If it's a solo match, I can make it to the final circle. Wow, is this something worth bragging about? Yu was curious. What was so charming about this game that even his picky brother had fallen for it? He heard that his uncle and daddy had fallen for the game as well. He logged into the game and was matched with an opponent. The next second, the screen was loaded into the spawn area. Yu realized that his character was a girl. He was wearing a white shirt and a skirt with a pair of sunglasses. It reminded him of how Lisa would look like when she grew up. The spawn area was noisy. As the microphone was connected to the public channel, it was extremely noisy. Yu found the switch to turn off the microphone. Suddenly, a voice entered his ears. Are you a big sister? Yu was shocked. When he came to his senses, he realized that a man with a rough appearance and a soft voice was standing in front of him. It was as if he could see the man's curious gaze through the screen. Just as Yu was about to turn off the voice chat, Xiao Yichen covered his earpiece and spoke into the microphone with a coquettish voice, Big brother, how old are you? Wow, the man immediately looked at Xiao Yichen's avatar. Yu turned his view as well, only to see that little Yichen had also created a female avatar. He despised him in his heart. You're a guy. Why are all your avatars female? Xiao Yichen covered the microphone and complained, because the men in this game are all unshaven. They're so ugly and rough. Then, he spoke into the microphone, Big brother, can you take me to chicken dinner? Yu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Little Yichen had yet to change his voice. Before that, his voice was no different from a girl's. Then, through the microphone's rendering, the male player on the other side quickly believed her. Wow! It's really a girl. His teammate ran over from the side and reminded him, don't be fooled. There are a lot of players pretending to be girls these days. Do they have voice-changing software? Little Yichen immediately said in a coquettish tone, I'm not pretending. Only an idiot would believe it. How could a woman claim to be a girl? Yu thought that no one would believe Xiao Yichen's words. However, he had obviously overestimated the IQ of this nerd in the game. You sound like a girl. You sound like a soft girl. Girl, your voice is so nice. What's your name? Xiao Yichen held back his laughter and smiled. Yao. Pfft. Yu could not hold it in and almost spat it out. Chapter 41-33. Little Yichen was simply out of his mind. Even his own sister was being cheated by him. Yu was speechless. If Yao finds out that you've tricked her like this, she'll definitely draw circles and curse you. You said it yourself. How could a sister bear to draw circles and curse her own brother? The game had begun. On the plain, the two men were still chatting with Xiao Yichen. It was obvious that they believed that Xiao Yichen was really a girl. Along the way, they kept beating around the bush. Miss, how old are you this year? I'm 18. Do you have a boyfriend? Why would an 18-year-old have a boyfriend? I'm so addicted to gaming that I'm not in the mood to date. Yu was expressionless the entire time. All she could do was listen to Xiao Yichen's nonsense. Miss, where do you want to jump to later? The military base. There's a lot of people at the military base. Miss, you have to protect me. Xiao Yichen grinned. Sure. Give me the guns you picked up and I'll protect you. Okay. That's great. Miss, you're going to carry us. The game was a two-player team. The two men were in the same team. However, you could tell that the two men were obviously trying to flirt with Xiao Yichen the entire time. She could also tell that they were very confident in their gaming skills. Miss, if you win this round, why don't we add each other as friends? Xiao Yichen smiled. Sure. Oh, right. Who's your other teammate? Xiao Yichen glanced at Yu and explained, she's my sister. Sister? Yes, her name is Lisa. What's her English name? It's very Western. Xiao Yichen winked at Yu. Sister, say something. Yu ignored him. The two men coaxed her. Miss Lisa, say something. Yu forced out a few words. I don't feel like talking. Xiao Yichen explained, it's her first time playing. I pestered her to team up with me. Otherwise, it's too boring to play alone. Yu rolled her eyes again. Xiao Yichen was good at bullshitting. Didn't he blush when he said that? Xiao Yichen marked the military base and teach Yu how to parachute jump. When they were near the base, Xiao Yichen said, jump. The four of them jumped Yu did it Yichen, S got Yichen he was in the S once they landed, they had to search for equipment. By searching for equipment, they were searching for guns. There were a lot of people in the military base. It could be said that it was a sea of people. Many people chose to stay in the military base. The game's effects were very realistic. After Yu landed, she immediately followed Xiao Yichen into a room. When they entered the room and their characters stopped moving, they could hear many footsteps passing by outside the window. Little Yichen's expression tensed up instantly. I think there are footsteps. Someone's here. Someone's here? Xiao Yichen shushed her and listened carefully. He immediately turned the camera to the window and said to Yu, I'll keep watch. You go and search the room for guns. Okay. Chapter 41-34. It looked like a box with bottles and jars inside. The words, first aid kit, were written on it. However, he did not know what this item was used for. Just as Yu was about to ask, Xiao Yichen asked curiously, did you pick something up? Yes, I picked it up. What is it? First aid kit. Medicine. Little Yichen immediately leaned over to take a look in disbelief. His eyes widened. Are you that lucky? In this game, other than first aid kits, painkillers, energy drinks, and epinephrine from the airdrop, there was also a first aid kit. This item could instantly replenish one's health points. The other items could only be replenished bit by bit. Even a first aid kit could only replenish 70% of one's health points. However, first aid kits were very rare. It could be said that they were very hard to come by. Are you that lucky? Am I that lucky? Maybe it's because of the newbie halo. Xiao Yichen continued, there are still a few rooms and a few floors above. You can search them all. This house is quite big, maybe there are other treasures. Okay. Thus, the boy began to search for them in an orderly manner. Every time he picked up an item, Yu would read it out loud. However, the more he read, the more Xiao Yichen wondered if Yu's luck was off the charts. Special Forces Helmet, Military Bulletproof Vest, 8x Scope, 98K Sniper Rifle, M16 or something. I think it's an automatic rifle. It uses 56 bullets. The more Xiao Yichen listened, the more his eyes widened. There's also a huge backpack. This is too much. How can I be that lucky? Forget about the level 3 backpack, level 3 helmet, level 3 military vest, and the 98K. However, the 8x scope and the first aid kit were good items that he could not find even if he searched for them. Amazing. Outside the house, there was a fierce exchange of gunfire. If he went out, he would become a live target. Therefore, Xiao Yichen decided to stay in the house. Seeing that no one was coming in, Xiao Yichen went upstairs and asked Yu Yu to give him some guns. Yu Yu was still not very familiar with the operation. Fortunately, there was no one around, so Xiao Yichen taught him bit by bit. Although he was not familiar with the operation, he was very familiar with the computer, so he quickly familiarized himself with the operation. Xiao Yichen had never held such a good starting weapon before. With his 98K in hand, he crouched on the rooftop and aimed outside the window. Fortunately, they were in the safe zone. Through the 8x scope, Xiao Yichen saw people fighting and exchanging fire in another area. He realized that the two most ferocious fighters were the two men who had hit on him on the plane. It wasn't far from him. The gunfire soon stopped. Xiao Yichen saw that the two men were looting the bags, so he asked Yu Yu to follow him and ran towards the two men. When he got closer, he hid behind a bunker and asked, "Little brother, did you pick up a good gun?" "Little sister, you're not dead." "That's great." The two men returned with a full load and threw a pile of good equipment in front of him. "Snatch it, a 4x scope, 8 first aid kits, and a lot of ammo. I'll give it all to you." "Wow! Are you really giving it all to me?" Xiao Yichen pretended to be overjoyed, and his voice became even more coquettish. Yu Yu shuddered when he heard this. How mushy. Chapter 41-35. However, it was obvious that, these two young men obviously fell for this trick. "Miss, your voice is so gentle. Miss, come with us. We'll take you to chicken dinner. Let's play together in the next round." Xiao Yichen said sweetly, "Sure." As he spoke, he winked at Yu Yu smugly. The smugness on his face was obvious. Yu Yu twitched his lips and said coldly, "I want a first aid kit too." Wow, although Yu Yu's voice was cold, it sounded like a young girl's voice. Moreover, he spoke softly. Through the earpiece, it sounded like a lowly's voice. A man walked over and whispered, "Just now. I found a first aid kit. Here. Take it." As he spoke, the man threw a first aid kit in front of Yu Yu. Yu Yu picked it up with a clear conscience. Xiao Yichen did not know whether to laugh or cry. The four of them formed a temporary team. They found a car and drove to another city. At first, Yu Yu felt that it was a little boring. However, he gradually realized that there was something fun about this game. The fact that so many people were playing this game proved that it had a certain charm to it. For example, this game did not have the messy marksmanship of other FPS games. It only had attentiveness, eyesight, and hearing. Being observant and alert was the only way for this game to last until the end. According to Xiao Yichen, if Gong Fan played this game, he would have an 8x scope. Yu Yu did not understand what he meant by an 8x scope. Little Yichen said that as long as Gong Fan was staring at the screen, even if it was a figure smaller than a sesame seed on a distant mountain peak, he could see it. Without any background, he could simply use a rifle to blast that person's head off. There were a few times when people suspected that he was cheating and reported him. However, after the official investigation, there were still some people who were unconvinced that there was no cheating involved. Once, he was matched with a professional player who specialized in doing live broadcasts of this game. When he was a streamer, he was shot in the head by Gong Fan. When he watched the replay and saw that Gong Fan did not have a scope, he naturally thought that he had used X-ray vision and auto-aim. As a result, there was a huge commotion. However, in the end, the officials checked and found that Gong Fan did not use a plug-in. They also analyzed the aiming trajectory and thought that it was a visual recognition and a holographic sight. The streamer was slapped in the face and had nothing to say. His popularity dropped immediately. After all, slandering other players for cheating was a shameful thing in the gaming world. There were many cheats in this game. However, there weren't many players like Gong Fan who played as if they were dead. Little Chen was also surprised that Gong Fan knew how to control the gun with some tricks to reduce the recoil of the gun when it was fired. He did not expect that Gong Fan, who had not been in contact with games, would be so good at such games. He also sighed. Why was it that even though they were born in the same mother's womb, his judgment was not as good as Gong Fan's? Gong Jie said that Gong Fan's dynamic vision was very good. There was once when they were playing table tennis. The ball was so fast, but he could actually see the trajectory of the table tennis ball clearly and even make predictions in advance. Gong Jie said that if Gong Fan were to play tennis, he would definitely be very good. Xiao Yichen was envious. Chapter 41-36. As the game progressed to the middle stage, the number of survivors on the map dropped to 29. In other words, other than the 4 of them, there were 25 players left. As Yu was not familiar with the game, he did not need to go out and kill people. It could be said that he was enjoying the fruits of someone else's labor. The other 2 young men and Xiao Yichen went around killing people. The 3 of them had a huge advantage in this 2-player competition. Yu was in charge of searching house by house under their cover. Gradually, the 4 of them became very well equipped. Each of them had at least 10 first aid kits. Even the level 3 backpack was full of bullets. Xiao Yichen asked Yu to keep 60 bullets for himself and give the rest to him. As for his backpack, he only needed to keep the first aid kit. In the final circle, the real battle was between grenades and first aid kits. Only by staying low could they get chicken dinner. However, what surprised Xiao Yichen was that not only was Yu lucky, but he also had the Destiny Circle. As the name suggested, the Destiny Circle was a safe zone and a blue circle that would appear in the game. It was not called a blue circle but an electric field. Standing in the circle would cause one's health to decrease. Only by entering the safe zone would one be able to avoid such damage. The safe zone would slowly shrink. In other words, the players would be forced to damage each other until the final winner was decided. Yu's face was extremely pale. He looked very lucky. Almost every time the safe zone refreshed, it would be under his feet. He had the newbie halo, but this halo was too scary. Xiao Yichen did not believe it. He asked Yu to stand there and not move. Yu hid beside the cabinet and lay there without moving. The safe zone refreshed twice, but it was still under his feet. The blue circle was getting smaller and smaller. There were not many players left in the game. There were only about 10 of them left. Xiao Yichen was determined to stay low. Yu squatted in the corner. Outside the door, the 2 little brothers acted as her escorts, guarding the window and making tut-tut-tut sounds non-stop. In the end, there were only 4 people left. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu, and Yu looked at Xiao Yichen. Clearly, they did not understand what he meant. Only 4 people left. Xiao Yichen whispered, "Should we get rid of those 2 boys so that we can get the chicken dinner?" Yu's lips twitched. "I don't think that's a good idea. After all, they have protected us all the way. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have been able to fight so smoothly. Are you trying to burn the bridge after crossing the river?" Xiao Yichen felt a little guilty when he heard that. Originally, he was also a little guilty. After all, these 2 little brothers were sincerely good to him. He couldn't bear to stab such kind-hearted little brothers in the back. Not long after, the 2 little brothers also came upstairs. "Miss, there's no one else. It's just the 4 of us. We promised to get the chicken dinner. Why don't we jump into the blue circle and let you guys get the chicken dinner? What do you think?" The little brothers obviously had the spirit of self-sacrifice. They had protected Xiao Yichen and Yu all the way. In the end, they actually wanted to sacrifice themselves so that Xiao Yichen and Yu could get the chicken dinner. Xiao Yichen felt even more guilty. "No need. You guys don't have to jump into the blue circle." Chapter 41-37. However, the 2 young men said in the public chat, we promised to bring you guys to win chicken dinner. Miss, I think you're pretty good. Why don't we add each other as friends after the game ends and we can win chicken dinner together? What do you think? Most men would be happy to meet a female player in a game like this. Most of the male players were heroes and wanted to be their bodyguards. This was a mysterious sense of mission. To them, bringing a girl to win chicken dinner was much more fulfilling than winning chicken dinner by themselves. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu Yu and hesitated. Should he tell them the truth? They would be disappointed and aggrieved, right? However, just like what Yu Yu had said, there had to be a winner at the end of the game anyway. At most, he would reveal his identity and see what their decision would be. Hence, Xiao Yichen mustered up his courage and said, "Actually, we're not girls." There was a long silence. It was so silent that Xiao Yichen thought the computer had crashed. The local server of this game had not been released yet. The server was not very stable and would often go crazy. Xiao Yichen thought that the server had gone crazy. However, a speechless voice came from the other side. What? You're not girls? Didn't you say that you're girls? Xiao Yichen then realized that it was not because the server was lagging but because the two young men could not accept reality and were silent. Yu Yu covered his face and felt a little embarrassed. Pretending to be a girl to play games was too cowardly. There was almost no good gaming experience and no sense of mission to survive until the end. He only felt that he had to lie down all the way. Xiao Yichen explained awkwardly, "Actually, we're all boys." "You use voice changers?" The boy's voice suddenly became angry. There was a type of software called a voice changer. When the software was turned on, the voice changer could be used to imitate other characters' voices. Some male players cheated and bought voice changers. Then, they pretended to be girls and won chicken dinner. Players called these people ladyboys. Xiao Yichen quickly explained, "It's not a voice changer. We're only 11, and we haven't started to change our voices yet, so..." Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a flurry of footsteps. Then, the two male players rushed in front of them with guns in their hands. All he heard was an angry shout, "Liar." Then, Xiao Yichen felt a burst of electric sparks on the screen. Tut tut tut, two male players were shooting at them with their AKMs. Soon, an interface popped up on the screen. "Keep up the good work and get the chicken dinner next time." The team was ranked second. Xiao Yichen was stunned and did not react for a long time. The two young men turned hostile. When they heard Xiao Yichen confess that he was a boy, they shot him and Yu Yu to death. This, Xiao Yichen was completely dumbfounded. He had thought of countless endings, but he never thought that it would be such an ending. Hey! How could it be like this? Just because he lied to them that he was a girl, they turned their backs on him? They had killed 100 players all the way to the final circle. Shouldn't they have some revolutionary feelings? They were even comrades. Yu Yu looked at Xiao Yichen's embarrassed expression and could not help but laugh out loud. Chapter 41-38. Yu Yu laughed mercilessly, completely ignoring Xiao Yichen's embarrassment. "You're laughing. You're still laughing? You still have the nerve to laugh? We almost got chicken dinner. What do you mean by, we?" Yu Yu held back her laughter and said seriously, "From the beginning to the end of the game, I don't think we contributed much." "What do you mean we didn't contribute much?" "We cheered them on and even helped them search for first aid kits." "Didn't you give them all 3 first aid kits?" "I felt guilty and knew that I shouldn't have lied to them that I was a girl, so I came clean." They didn't have to be so heartless. They even turned their backs on us and shot us to death. Yu Yu couldn't hold it in anymore. If Yueyao grows up and finds out that you used her name to cheat others, let's see how she'll deal with you. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he didn't think much of it. That'll happen when she's older. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard outside the door. "Brother, speak of the devil. Yu left the computer table and walked to the door. He saw Yueyao standing outside the door in a little dress. She looked up at Yu with a smile. "It's time to eat. Mommy told me to call you guys." "Yueyao, good girl." Yu picked Yueyao up and hugged her like a glutinous rice ball. He couldn't bear to let her go. Yueyao was already more than 3 years old. Gradually, her facial features became more and more mature. The amazing thing was that Yueyao and Mu Yaja didn't look much different from each other. Perhaps it was because their daddy's genes were too strong. Old people always said that boys usually looked more like their mothers, while girls looked more like their fathers. However, Yu and Xiao Chen, this pair of twins, looked more like Mu Yaja. She had thought that when Yueyao grew up, she would be more like Yun Shishir. When she was young, she looked very similar to Yun Shishir. However, as he grew bigger and bigger, other than his eyes and skin, the rest of his body started to resemble Mu Yaja. Yueyao's skin was very white, even whiter than Yun Shishir's. It was not an exaggeration to describe her as milky white. She had the rare snow-white skin of Asians. Her curled eyelashes were also occupied by him. At first glance, she looked like a doll. Yun Shishir especially loved to dress her up. Dresses, princess outfits, she was so happy to dress her up. Every girl had a dream of being a princess. Even after they grew up, this dream remained. However, some people were lucky enough to keep this dream alive, such as her. She poured all her dreams of being a princess onto Yueyao. From the princess room to the princess dress, Yun Shishir couldn't wait to pamper Yueyao. However, she was still the most strict with Yueyao. After all, if she wasn't strict, Yueyao could be said to be omnipotent at home. Too many people doted on her. Mu Yaja, Gong Jia, Hua Jin, Yu, and Xiao Chen. No one could bear to not dote on her. Especially Mu Yaja. He was a slave to his daughter. His servile nature was simply unseen. He could never bear to lose his temper at Yueyao. The most memorable day was that day when Mu Yaja woke up in the morning and prepared to go to work. He stood in front of the mirror and combed his hair. Usually, he didn't allow others to touch a single strand of his hair. Even Yun Shishir had limited privileges. Chapter 41-39. Every morning before he went to the office, he would meticulously fix his hair and style it with mousse. Yueyao suddenly woke up and opened her mouth to ask for daddy. He walked over and picked her up. His hair was not fixed yet, but the little princess already thought that his hair looked good. She grabbed it with her little hands. Mu Yaja did not allow it and patted her little hands. As a result, her rebellious heart was aroused. The more her daddy did not allow her to touch it, the more she wanted to touch it. Her little hands scratched wildly, messing up his hair. Yun Shishir walked over and saw Mu Yaja carrying Yueyao. She looked helpless, but she could not bear to scold him. That day, a certain someone went to work with this messy hair. It was said that Lu Jinyu and Jianghu had been secretly laughing at him behind his back. It was unprecedented for their boss to appear in the office with a head of messy hair. However, his hair had already been fixed. Unless it was washed, it really could not be fixed. When asked for the reason, Mu Yaja was even proud of his little princess's masterpiece, and said that Yueyao had personally done it for him. Lu Jinyu and Jianghu were amused when they heard that. They laughed at him for being a clown. Mu Yaja said half-jokingly, "Who asked me to only have one daughter? If we have another one, it won't be just one." Jianghu also joked. Lu Jinyu bumped his shoulder. "Are you stupid? Boss only has one daughter. There won't be any more in the future. What's wrong? Have you forgotten?" Lu Jinyu was speechless. Boss had a sterilization operation. "Ah, I remember now." Jianghu only then remembered that after Yueyao was born, Mu Yaja had a sterilization operation. A son and a daughter. It could be said to be perfect. He had nothing to be regretful about. Yu hugged Yueyao and teased her while saying meaningfully, "Yueyao, in the future, don't play with that brother of yours. He even cheated his biological sister." "Humph. Let's ignore him." With that, Yu carried Yueyao away. In the room, Xiao Yichen was dumbfounded as he watched Yu leave with Yueyao in her arms. "When did I?" he muttered and chased after her. Yu enjoyed spending time with Yueyao. Yueyao liked to pester him to play games. However, he was only 3 years old after all. The games he played were naturally the most childish of all. Yu had long passed the age of playfulness. He matured much earlier than other children, so he was not interested in most of the games that Yueyao liked to play. But as long as it was something Yueyao liked to play, he was willing to be patient and play with him wholeheartedly. Yueyao likes to play with dolls. For this reason, Mu Yaja specially decorated a room for dolls. The room was very small, but all the wardrobes and furnishings were custom-made according to Yueyao's height. The wardrobes were filled with dolls' clothes and toys for playing house. Yueyao likes to dress the dolls. Every time she pulled Yu into the room, she liked to change the clothes for each of the dolls. At this time, Yu would style the doll's hair according to the clothes that Yueyao changed. The siblings would also study how to braid the hair. Yu thought to himself, let's just treat it as practice for the dolls. When Yueyao grew up, the hair braiding technique that he had practiced would come in handy. Hence, sometimes, Yu played even more seriously than Yueyao. Chapter 4140. If it were Gong Fan, he wouldn't be that interested in dolls. However, if Yueyao pestered him to play with her, he would be very willing. For some reason, if Yueyao pestered them, no matter which family member it was, they would feel a great sense of accomplishment. Making Yueyao like them was a great source of pride. He remembered that once, Yueyao pestered Gong Jia and asked him to hug her. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Gong Jia bragged about it for half a year. "Yueyao likes it and wants me to hug her. My niece is especially clingy to me." It seemed that this gave him a great sense of accomplishment. Because of this, Mu Yaja muttered in his heart. That day, it was just that he wasn't around. If he had been around, Gong Jia wouldn't have had the chance to appear. However, Gong Jia felt indignant. He felt that as an uncle, his charm was not inferior to Mu Yaja's at all. One was a father, the other was an uncle. They were at loggerheads. Gong Fan liked Yueyao very much. Perhaps this kind of affection was second only to the kind of affection he had for Yunshishir. When he was with Yueyao, even if the little girl was noisy, his heart would feel very peaceful and beautiful. The most beautiful thing in the world was when she was noisy and he was laughing. When Xiao Yichen came to the living room, he saw Yueyao sitting in Yu's arms, holding a pizza and eating it with relish. This pizza was made by Yunshishir. Recently, she wasn't very busy, so she started to learn how to bake. Not to mention, she really didn't have any talent at all. Thus, after asking many friends for help, she finally managed to buy a few baking recipes. She also spent a lot of money to buy a super expensive smart oven. It was the kind of oven that even idiots wouldn't burn. In the recipe books, no matter what ingredient it would be labeled with the amount, the number of grams, and so on. Yunshishir strictly followed the recipe books and learned to cook step by step. She even used test tubes to control the amount of sugar. With the help of other tools, she finally made a few finished products. This plate of pizza was her successful product. Although it wasn't as delicious as Yu's, it was comparable to the pizza in the restaurant. Yueyao was a picky eater, just like Mu Yaja, but she could not bear to part with this pizza. Yunshishir felt a great sense of accomplishment. "Where's Daddy?" Little Yichen sat down in his seat and looked around. "Why isn't Daddy back yet?" "He has to work overtime today for a meeting, so let's eat first and not wait for him." "And he's not coming to eat?" "Probably has a dinner appointment." Wuxia rarely had dinner parties unless it was an important one that he could not refuse. Only then would he not return home for dinner. It must be said that Yunshi's marriage to Wuxia was truly a marriage of love. In the entertainment industry, there were many people who were jealous of her. Most female celebrities who married into rich families looked glamorous on the surface, but in reality, they had to swallow their own bitterness. Everyone was waiting. When Yunshi's scandal was exposed, the reporters from the gossip magazines were also eager to take pictures of Yunshi's unfortunate marriage. Almost every time there was any news, these reporters would be on the move. They remembered one time when a reporter took a picture of Wuxia hugging a woman as he went in and out of a shopping mall. Hence, they spread the news that Wuxia was having an affair and that Yunshi had a love rival. In the end, a fan enlarged the picture and found that the woman in the picture was Yunshi herself. The loving scene between the husband and wife made many people envious. Chapter 41-41. This piece of news also became the biggest joke at that time. Some people laughed at how the paparazzi had resorted to all sorts of underhanded means to smear Yunshi and Wuxia's marriage in order to hype up the news. Some people envied Yunshi for marrying for love. There were so many female celebrities in the entertainment industry, but Yunshi was not the only one who had successfully married into a wealthy family. However, there were not many lucky people like Yunshi. In fact, there were none at all. Most female celebrities, especially those in the entertainment industry, dreamed of marrying into a wealthy family. However, all the rich young masters knew in their hearts that celebrities who came from the entertainment industry would not be able to survive in the industry if they did not have some tricks up their sleeves. Hence, they knew very well that celebrities weren't that great and weren't that great. Therefore, most female celebrities who married into wealthy families did not lead happy lives. Even if their husbands were extremely wealthy, it was already extremely difficult for them to maintain their status after marrying into a wealthy family. There was no need to think about how many colorful banners their husbands had outside. Some men would even brazenly bring other women into their homes and have several women serve one husband. As wives, they could only swallow their bitterness. Because the family's finances were controlled by the men. After marriage, many female celebrities retired or were in a semi-retired state. The most pitiful thing was to marry a rich second-generation heir and live a good life. In the end, after 3 years of marriage, they found out that their husband was a fake rich man who was on the verge of bankruptcy. They were ridiculed for nothing. This female celebrity wanted a divorce so that she could make a comeback and start acting again after the divorce. However, her management company warned her that when she announced her retirement, she had said that she had married for love. If news of this divorce got out, the public would laugh at her for marrying into a wealthy family for money. Now that her husband was bankrupt, she wanted a divorce. That was too worldly. Her image was not flattering. Therefore, the public relations company created an image for her. In order to repay her husband's debts, she made a comeback to support her family. In short, the entertainment industry was full of different kinds of people, but most of them did not lead a good life. Therefore, her life was not satisfactory. So many people hoped that Yunshi would not lead a good life. It was as if their mentality could only be balanced if she did not lead a good life. Otherwise, so many people who married into wealthy families were unlucky. Why should she be happy? There were even female celebrities who hired private detectives to secretly spy on Yunshi after she married Wuxia. However, the truth was that they saw it clearly. After marriage, Wuxia's business. The Jianghu financial group had replaced the Mu family's position in the capital and became the #1 wealthy family. However, after marriage, he cared a lot about the family. If it was not too important, he would usually leave it to Lu Jinyu and Jianghu to follow up. After having a daughter, this high-spirited man seemed to be even more gentle. In the past, whenever he appeared in front of the public, Wuxia would be unsmiling and aloof no matter what happened. Of yun of yun of yun of yun of yun of mu 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 of yun of yun of yun. He was also willing to appear on camera. Occasionally, the media would muster up the courage to ask about the little princess, and he was willing to share some of his happiness after marriage. Chapter 41-42. Especially when it came to the time when he was a stay-at-home dad, he did everything by himself, from making milk powder to changing diapers. He worked hard to serve this little princess. The reporters did not believe it. What a joke. A man with a net worth of hundreds of millions actually did not hire a nanny and changed diapers himself? Didn't he find it dirty? Wuxia retorted matter-of-factly, "She's my own daughter. What's there to dislike?" There was a hint of displeasure in his tone. It was as if that question was blasphemy to his daughter. After getting married, even though Wuxia was a newlywed, he was slowly becoming more and more like a veteran. During the day, he hinted that he would go to work and leave work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. During holidays, he would take his wife and children on holiday and even attend parent-teacher meetings personally. The entire entertainment industry was dumbfounded. What kind of person was Wuxia? After getting married, if it had been 1 or 2 years, it would have been fine. But after getting married for so long, there were no scandals at all. The only scandals were with his own wife. Wasn't that infuriating? Everyone was waiting to see Yunshi's drama, but in the end, they were slapped in the face. It was infuriating. What was the saying? Comparisons were odious. Why was it that other people's husbands, who were also rich young masters, were so happy and treated each other with respect, while they lived in such an abyss of suffering? It was unfair. Because of this, someone specially hired a water army to smear Yunshi's image. In the end, not long after, Wuxia did public relations and banned that female celebrity. He banned her just like that. He did not say many harsh words, but he did it cleanly. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey. With this, no one dared to be rash. It's rare that daddy doesn't come home for dinner. Xiao Yichen held a drumstick and asked curiously, "What's the matter?" "I don't know. You know, I don't know much about your daddy's work." Yunshi smiled and asked him, "How is it? Is today's drumstick better than the one you made last time?" Xiao Yichen said, and, "You're not allowed to compare with Yu." Yunshi quickly interrupted him. Yu held back her laughter. Xiao Yichen thought about it carefully and subconsciously smacked his lips. Oh, Yunshi cleared her throat and said, "You're not allowed to smack your lips while eating." Xiao Yichen smiled, revealing his pearly white teeth. "Because mommy cooks well." "Is it better than last time?" "Yes." "That's good." Yunshi had reached perfection. Anyway, it was fine as long as Xiao Yichen liked it. Yu said, "Mommy's cooking skills are improving." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yichen lowered her voice and whispered into his ear, "You don't know how expensive Mommy's cooking books are." Last time, she even secretly wanted to sign up for a cooking class. If even that doesn't taste good, then, Yunshi's ears were sharp and she heard it. "What did you say?" I said, Xiao Yichen immediately said, "I just said that Yu's cooking skills are so good. He must have inherited Mommy's talent. It's just that Mommy didn't show it in the past." "Is that so?" Yunshi looked at Yu suspiciously. Xiao Yichen also looked at Yu. Yu glanced at him and raised her eyebrows. Xiao Yichen looked as innocent as a little deer. Xiao Yichen just said that if Mommy cooks for him every day, he will be so happy that he won't know what to do. Yunshi was relieved to hear Yu say this. Chapter 41-43. Luckily, his mommy was a sweet and naive girl. She could be coaxed easily. Otherwise, he would have lost his ears. Xiao Yichen was secretly delighted and settled down. Yueyao reached for the fries, obviously wanting to eat them. Yu immediately took a free for her. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he immediately took a free and presented it to her as if it was a treasure. The two fries were placed in front of her. One was from Yu Yu's hand, and the other was from Xiao Yichen's hand. Without any hesitation, Yue Yao grabbed Yu Yu's finger and snatched the fries from his hand, eating them with relish. Luckily, Xiao Yichen wasn't a puppy. If his ears were long enough, they would have drooped by now. Are the fries that big brother gave you not nice? Xiao Yichen wagged his tail like a puppy. He looked at Yue Yao pitifully and said pitifully, "Why don't you want my fries?" Yue Yao said in her baby voice, "Your hands aren't as good-looking as little brother's." Was this a reason? Xiao Yichen looked at his hands and then looked at Yu Yu's hands. Although they weren't exactly the same, there wasn't much difference. Which part isn't good-looking? Xiao Yichen pouted unhappily, but he was deliberately teasing Yue Yao. Yue Yao immediately reached over with her oily hands and turned Xiao Yichen's hands around. She pointed at the rough calluses on his palms and said, "Look, your hands aren't as good-looking as little brother's." Yu Yu frowned slightly when she saw this. The only big difference between Xiao Yichen's hands and his was probably their palms. His palms were clean, but Xiao Yichen's palms had been sent to the special training camp by Mu Yaja when he was young. Because of the recoil, it was inevitable that Xiao Yichen's palms would have some calluses. Xiao Yichen looked at them and suddenly laughed. He said to Yue Yao, "But I can protect you. If anyone dares to bully my little sister in the future, I can take them down with one hand." Yue Yao was teased and revealed her cute little front teeth. At first glance, she looked like a naughty little bunny. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but look at her affectionately. He had looked at Yu Yao like this many times, and he couldn't help but feel the urge to give her the best things in the world. However, no matter how he thought about it, wasn't this cute little sister of his the best? Little Yichen asked again, "Do you want these fries, then?" "I want that." Little Yue Yao pointed at the ketchup. Xiao Yichen immediately squeezed some ketchup and dipped it into the fries. Yue Yao panicked when she saw this. More. More. She knew that the ketchup was delicious, but until now, she still couldn't pronounce the words, ketchup, skillfully. Xiao Yichen taught her, "This is ketchup." "Ketchup, yes, that's right." Xiao Yichen brought the fries to her mouth. Yue Yao immediately opened her mouth wide, afraid that the sauce would get on her lips. She was a clean freak and loved cleanliness. In the end, no matter how much she opened her mouth was too small and the sauce still got on the corner of her lips. "Aya." Yue Yao scrunched up her little face. "It's dirty." Xiao Yichen immediately picked up a tissue and coaxed her, "Big brother will wipe it clean for you. Don't move." Little Yue Yao obediently stopped moving. She pouted and let him wipe it. Yu Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she saw this. "Don't wipe it. It'll get on your lips later. Can't we wipe it together?" Chapter 41-44. However, Yue Yao refused to comply and said seriously, "No. If I don't wipe it clean now, it will get on my clothes. It's so uncomfortable, ha ha ha." Unspoken laughed. Now that Yue Yao was all grown up, she had her own way of speaking and slowly had her own ideas. It was quite fun. Unspoken smiled as she watched this scene. Suddenly, she felt a little worried. Sometimes, the happier one was, the more afraid one would be. This kind of happiness was too short. She knew very well that no matter who it was, life would not be smooth sailing. The happier one was, the more uneasy one would feel. Hence, the more uneasy one was, the more one cherished it. After dinner, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen took Yue Yao for a walk. In the past, Unspoken was still worried. However, after thinking about it, she felt that with Xiao Yichen around, he would definitely be able to protect Yue Yao and Yu Yu. Hence, gradually, Unspoken felt more at ease. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu took Yue Yao for a walk. Unspoken was about to wash the dishes when her cell phone suddenly rang. She walked over and picked up her cell phone. She thought that it was Mu Yaja calling, but when she looked at the screen, she saw that it was an unknown number. She thought that it was a prank call and wanted to reject it. However, when she saw that it was an international number, she picked it up curiously. "Is this Xianxia? I'm Alice." Alice's serious voice came from the other end of the line. Xianxia heard this and nodded. "Yes, it's like this. Usually, Hua Jin would call me at this time every day. However, he didn't call today. I called him, but no one picked up for a long time. What's going on?" Xiaxia's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. Alice agreed to hand Natalia over to Hua Jin on the condition that Hua Jin cooperated with Alice to keep an eye on Natalia. It wasn't that they were monitoring the prisoners. Instead, it was Natalia's second personality. Until now, no one understood it. Therefore, Hua Jin had to cooperate with Alice. Every night, he would report Natalia's situation to Alice. However, today was the only day that they did not call. Alice was a little worried. "I didn't want to trouble you, but Gong Jia is not here. If it's convenient for you, can you go and see what's going on?" Xianxia immediately agreed. "Okay, I'll go right away." "Okay, be careful on the road." Xianxia hung up the phone and stood up. She instructed the housekeeper to inform Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu when they returned with Yue Yao that she had something to do. She grabbed her coat and left the house in a hurry. It was not far from Hua Jin's villa. Xianxia arrived 20 minutes later. She parked her car and walked to the door to press the doorbell. The villa was equipped with a butler and housekeeper. The butler opened the door. He recognized Xianxia and greeted her respectfully. "Hello. May I know? Is Hua Jin at home?" "Young master is at home." The butler was a little puzzled. "May I know what's the matter?" "I want to see him." Xianxia walked past him hurriedly and was about to enter the villa. The butler stopped her. "Young master is still resting." "Resting?" Xianxia was puzzled. "It's not even night time yet. Why is he asleep so early?" "It's not that he's asleep. He hasn't woken up since last night." Xianxia widened her eyes. "What? He's still not awake? He slept for a day and a night?" Chapter 41-45. What's going on? Xianxia's expression turned serious. "Is he sick?" "No." The butler reported truthfully, "I'm also worried if he's sick. But I've also taken a thermometer. His temperature is normal and there aren't any adverse reactions. He's just become especially sleepy." "Sleepy," Xianxia muttered this word silently. She didn't know why her eyelids suddenly twitched. Recently, Gong Fan had become especially sleepy. He had never been like this in the past. Ever since that day, after his afternoon nap, Gong Fan had never appeared again. Dual personality was a very complicated illness. If she wanted to find out about this personality, she wouldn't know how to meet him unless she went through a psychiatrist or a psychiatrist. What was going on? Gong Fan was the same. Hua Jin was the same. What exactly happened to the two of them? Xianxia couldn't figure it out. "Anyway, I want to see him." "Okay, I'll bring you there." Xianxia was about to step in when a strange voice came from behind her. Xianxia?" This familiar voice made Xianxia turn around immediately. She looked over and saw Qin Zhou and Liang Yin standing behind her. They looked equally confused. "Why are you here?" the two of them said almost at the same time. Xianxia smiled, but she couldn't bring herself to smile. "I'm here to see Hua Jin." "What a coincidence." Qin Zhou curled his lips and walked over. "I called Hua Jin. I heard that he's not feeling well, so I came to see what's going on." "He told you that he's not feeling well?" "Yes." Qin Zhou nodded. I called him to talk about the termination of the contract. He said a few words vaguely and hung up. I was a little worried, so I decided to visit him personally. Yun Shishir noticed Liang Yin at the side and smiled politely at her. Liang Yin, on the other hand, was at a loss of what to do. Although it wasn't the first time they met, standing in front of Yun Shishir, who was so gentle and beautiful, she couldn't help but feel ashamed of her inferiority. You don't have to be so reserved with her. Shishir was a nice person. She didn't put on airs. Just treat her as an ordinary person. Qin Zhou said. When Liang Yin heard this, she felt even more uneasy. Yun Shishir smiled. It's nothing. Since she's Qin Zhou's friend, she's also my friend. However, now is not the time to chat. Let's go and see Hua Jin first. Liang Yin was also a little worried about Hua Jin, so the three of them walked through the door. There was no one in the living room, and the housekeeper was cleaning. When she saw them, she was shocked. The butler stepped forward and asked, "Is young master still resting?" "That's right." The nanny came back to her senses and immediately said, "He's still in the room. He hasn't woken up yet. Let's go up and take a look." Yun Shishir and Qin Zhou exchanged glances and instructed Liang Yin to wait downstairs. The two of them hurried upstairs. When they reached the bedroom door, Qin Zhou knocked on the door and called out a few times. When there was no response, he opened the door and walked in. The moment he opened the door, he happened to see Hua Jin getting out of bed and walking over. When the latter saw them, he was stunned for a moment. "You guys. Why are you guys here?" Seeing that Hua Jin was safe and sound, Yun Shishir heaved a sigh of relief. Her knitted brows finally relaxed a little. "It's good that you're okay." She had been frightened. She had thought that no one cared about him because he was sick. Chapter 41-46. Seeing that Yun Shishir and Qin Zhou's expressions had changed from anxiety to relief, Hua Jin was even more perplexed. "Look at you guys making a fuss over nothing. I thought I was terminally ill." "Who knows? The butler said that you've been sleeping since last night and haven't woken up yet." Alice also said that no one answered her calls. "Otherwise, we wouldn't have been so nervous." Qin Zhou frowned. "Didn't you say that you weren't feeling well?" Hua Jin's heart warmed when he heard that. It turned out that these two fellows had rushed over in a hurry just for this matter. "I'm fine, don't worry. It's just that I really don't feel well. I don't know why, but I feel like I can't wake up." He held his heavy forehead and sat down on the edge of the bed unsteadily. Qin Zhou walked over and realized that his face was inexplicably pale and bloodless. "What's the matter? You don't look well." Yun Shishir noticed it too, and her heart clenched tightly. Hua Jin shook his head. "Probably because I was too tired recently and didn't get enough rest." He comforted them, but in fact, he didn't know why he had become so lethargic and his mental state was so bad. Where's Natalia?" Hua Jin suddenly thought of her. Yun Shishir was curious when he mentioned Natalia, but she said, she should be well taken care of by the nanny. "Don't worry. When we first came in, they were all very casual. She must have been well taken care of. You, on the other hand, do you want to go to the hospital for a checkup?" "Hospital?" Hua Jin looked terrified. "I don't want to go to the hospital." "Why?" "There are so many people in the hospital. If I show up, who knows what news will come out." After he said that, Yun Shishir and Qin Zhou suddenly looked at each other and burst out laughing. Hua Jin was so afraid of going to the hospital, not because he was afraid of doctors or injections. Something very interesting had happened previously. Hua Jin had gone to the hospital for a checkup because of his severe cold. As a result, he attracted the attention of his fans. While he was waiting for the test results, the hospital was overcrowded. He wore a mask and sat at the entrance of the anorectal department. Because he had a severe cold, his head was heavy and his feet were light. He didn't notice the fans who were secretly taking pictures of him. He was even smug that his disguise was so successful that he wasn't recognized. As a result, the photo of him wearing a mask and sitting at the entrance of the anorectal department was secretly taken by fans and posted online. Many people noticed that he was sitting at the entrance of the department and could not help but imagine. Is Hua Jin a bottom? Could the rumors be true? Is Hua gay? No way. Hua Jin Appa? He is the bottom one. Hua Jin isn't surprised, but what's surprising is that the rumors are actually true. He actually go to the hospital. Will he be alright? It was only then that Hua Jin realized what had happened. When he saw these comments and rumors online after he recovered, he almost vomited blood. These fans' ability to talk from just looking at pictures was too scary. He had just had a severe cold. Why did the rumors become so exaggerated? Chapter 41-47. As a result, Hua Jin was traumatized by the hospital. He had to stay away from it. Don't worry. It's not a big problem. Although Hua Jin didn't know why he was so sleepy, he was sure that it had nothing to do with his health. Yunshishir was also helpless. However, seeing how insistent Hua Jin was, she couldn't do anything about it. You still remember that? Qin Zhou snorted and threw a stack of newspapers in front of him. Why don't you explain why you want to terminate your contract with Huanyu and this news? His tone was a little unfriendly. He seemed a little angry. Hua Jin had left without saying goodbye. He had even rushed to finish filming his movie. He had made an inexplicable phone call and told Qin Zhou that he had decided to semi-retire and would not accept any jobs for the time being. He was also willing to bear all the responsibility for breaching the contract. Qin Zhou was a little surprised. When he asked for the reason, Hua Jin didn't say much. He only expressed his guilt towards him. It wasn't easy for Qin Zhou to nurture him for so many years. Now that Hua Jin had announced his semi-retirement, Qin Zhou was even doubting himself. What kind of system was he in? Why did the artists under him suddenly quit for no reason? Except for Gu Xingzi. Whether it was Yunshishir or Hua Jin, one had retired for the sake of her family and the other had retired for unknown reasons. Just when he was confused, he saw a piece of news on the media. The paparazzi had taken a picture of Hua Jin carrying a girl to the mall. He was holding Natalia's hand and taking her to the children's section to buy toys. Coincidentally, this reporter was also shopping in the mall and casually recorded it with his phone. Without any effort, it created a sensational piece of news in the entertainment industry. Hua Jin's illegitimate daughter exposed. Popular young actor Hua Jin appears in a bustling mall holding a mixed-race girl's hand. Their relationship is confusing. In addition, the news that Hua Jin was going to semi-retire from the entertainment industry spread like wildfire. As a result, everyone suspected that Hua Jin had an illegitimate daughter and was being forced to get married. So, he decided to get married, retire from the entertainment industry, and give up on his acting career. Hua Jin stared dumbfoundedly at the extravagant reports in the newspaper. His sluggish expression was almost distorted. What nonsense is this? That's what I want to ask you. Qin Zhou said unhappily, why didn't you tell me that you had an illegitimate daughter? Even if there's something that's hard to say, I won't blame you if you tell me. You said you wanted to retire without saying a word. Do you respect me? Hua Jin was speechless. He said with a headache, actually. I don't know how to sort out this relationship, but the child really isn't mine. Not yours? Qin Zhou expressed his doubts. Really? Don't you know me? Hua Jin felt wronged and said, am I the kind of person who messes around? That's not it. Qin Zhou changed the topic and said, you're a delicate little flower. You can only be trampled on, but you don't have the ability to trample on others. Hua Jin hugged the blanket and felt extremely wronged. That's too much. I'm very obedient, I won't do those kinds of things. You're not allowed to criticize me like that. Alright. Then. Qin Zhou regained his serious expression. May I know the background of this child? Chapter 41-48. Your responsibility? Qin Zhou was even more surprised now. What was all this about? Unspoken explained, this is a girl that my brother asked Hua Jin to take care of. She has a split personality and needs to be adopted and taken care of. She also needs treatment. Initially, I wanted to adopt her, but you know my family's situation. Yueyao needs someone to take care of her. Yu, Xiao Yichen, and now Lisa. I can't do anything else. So, I had no choice but to ask Hua Jin to take care of her. Qin Zhou's astonished gaze landed on Hua Jin. Hua Jin looked like a wronged kitten. Actually, Unspoken felt very guilty about this. Although Gong Jia had given Hua Jin quite a lot of compensation, asking Hua Jin to take care of a child was like kidnapping his life. It didn't matter whether he was willing or not. After all, Hua Jin had no experience and would be a burden to him. However, Hua Jin accepted it silently. Unspoken was quite surprised that he was willing to take care of Natalia and even retire from the entertainment industry. Unspoken briefly explained the situation to Qin Zhou. After listening to her explanation, Qin Zhou understood the situation. Okay. I'm here today to deal with the termination of the contract. As he spoke, Qin Zhou threw a letter to him. Hua Jin tore it open and read through the document with a look of astonishment on his face. What's wrong? Qin Zhou raised his eyebrows. Do you have any objections to the termination of the contract? Why is the penalty blank? Hua Jin blinked. Do you want me to fill it in? Qin Zhou glanced at him coldly. If you follow the rules, you'll have to pay the company at least 8 figures. 8 figures, Hua Jin sucked in a breath of cold air. Although Gong Jia had promised him that he would help him pay the penalty, he was still shocked when he heard the amount. However, Qin Zhou actually didn't want him to pay. Surprise! What a good person! Hua Jin was so touched that he covered his mouth and tears streamed down his face. Boss Qin, you're really... Shut up. Qin Zhou was still a little annoyed. He was still a little depressed. He had originally planned to make Hua Jin the top star, but in the end, he was a disappointment. He wanted to retire, and the reason was that he had to take care of his child. What a weird reason. However, for the sake of his boss, Qin Zhou had to give her face. Forget it. Qin Zhou waved his hand. If you're still willing to act in the future, I'll help you find resources. If you don't want to, then just stay at home and be a stay-at-home dad. Thank you, Qin Da. Hua Jin almost hugged the man's trousers and burst into tears. I'm still a little reluctant to terminate the contract. Don't. Qin Zhou pushed him away in disgust. Hurry up and terminate the contract. I've had it with you. Hua Jin, what happened to the revolutionary camaraderie? Here. Pen. Qin Zhou threw the pen to him. Hua Jin took the pen and signed the termination agreement obediently. However, he didn't know why, but after he signed his name, he felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Although he had said earlier that he wanted to quit the entertainment industry because he had had enough of it, when it came to leaving, he actually felt a little reluctant and hesitant. The entertainment industry had taken up almost half of his life. It gave him loneliness, glory, belittlement, and limitless glory. Chapter 41-49. Unspoken looked at Hua Jin's lonely expression when he signed the contract and couldn't help but feel her heart ache. She understood Hua Jin's complicated feelings about the entertainment industry. It wasn't home, but it was home. For a moment, he actually felt reluctant to leave. Unspoken immediately comforted him, "Don't feel sad. If you feel reluctant, you can take on a good script if you see one. Hua Jin smiled. It's okay, I'm just being a little pretentious. After all, I've been in the entertainment industry since I was a teenager, so. He smiled. It's okay. After a pause, he suddenly thought of something. He frowned and thought of Natalia. Ah, Natalia. Unspoken was also puzzled when she heard him mention Natalia. Where is she? I don't think I saw her. She should be in her room. Hua Jin was a little puzzled. He didn't know when it happened. He felt like he had slept for a long time. When he woke up, his head was a little swollen, but he couldn't remember what had happened. He vaguely remembered that after Unspoken, Yu, and Xiao Yichen left, he didn't remember what happened after that. Hua Jin went to Natalia's room, but the room was empty. Just as he was about to leave, he saw a beautiful crystal ball on the table. Before he could take a closer look, he heard Unspoken and the nanny's voices outside the door. Young miss is in the back garden. Back garden? I saw her playing on the swing in the back garden. Hua Jin walked out of the door. When the nanny saw him, she greeted him respectfully, "Young master, is she in the back garden?" Yes. When the nanny saw Hua Jin, her face finally relaxed. You're finally awake. I thought you weren't feeling well. Hua Jin waved his hand. It's okay, I'm fine. I'll go check on Natalia. Unspoken suddenly called out to him. Actually, I'm here because I'm worried about you. You didn't pick up your phone. I'm worried that something might have happened to you. Hua Jin didn't think much of it. What's there to worry about? Alice called you, but you didn't answer. She needs to know Natalia's situation at all times. You understand? Hua Jin frowned and nodded. Okay, I'll give her a call later. Unspoken nodded and felt relieved. She looked at Jianghu and said, then I'm going home. There are 3 little guys waiting for me at home. All right. Hua Jin looked at Jianghu. What about you? Jianghu raised his eyebrows. Why? It's my first time here, and you're in a hurry to chase me away? Hua Jin. No. I have no intention of chasing you away. Jianghu cleared his throat and glanced at him. You haven't shown me around your new home. As he spoke, Jianghu looked around and clicked his tongue. The villas here aren't cheap, right? You seem to have saved up a little after all these years. He was still a little suspicious. He knew Hua Jin's income very well. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out how he could have so much money to buy a villa here. However, he didn't ask too much. After all, it was his personal matter. When Hua Jin heard this, he felt his scalp stiffen. He actually wanted to explain to Jianghu that he didn't buy this villa himself. Chapter 4150. However, he couldn't explain it clearly to Jianghu. If he couldn't explain it clearly, he was afraid that Jianghu would think too much. Hence, he didn't explain the origin of the villa. Forget it. I don't expect you to stay and treat me to tea. Jianghu's original intention was to personally hand over the contract termination letter to Hua Jin. Now that Hua Jin had signed it, the settlement document was effective. He had other things to do. He had to bring Liang Yin to a dinner later. After sending Unspoken downstairs, Hua Jin went downstairs and saw Liang Yin sitting on the sofa. He looked a little surprised. Why are you here? When Liang Yin saw Hua Jin, she immediately put down her teacup and stood up to greet him. I heard that you weren't feeling well, so I came to visit you. Oh, you came to visit me, Hua Jin deliberately said with disdain. Since you said you came to visit, why did you come empty-handed? Liang Yin was speechless. Hua Jin walked over and asked in a low voice, how are things going between you and Jianghu? Upon hearing his question, Liang Yin's face turned red. She said in annoyance, hey, lower your voice. My voice is already very low. Hua Jin glanced at Qin Zhou. He was talking to Yun Shishir and obviously didn't notice them. Hence, he said to Liang Yin, as the saying goes, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. After I terminate the contract, Qin Zhou will definitely put all his attention on you. This way, you will have more opportunities. However, as a girl, you shouldn't be too proactive. Be more reserved, understand? You really want to terminate the contract? Why? You can't bear to? Hua Jin laughed and said, I'm just fulfilling my dream in advance. Look, I don't have to work and I can travel around the world to my heart's content. Isn't that good? Are you a mistress? Liang Yin's words were like pearls. Hua Jin's lips twitched violently. Kept woman? Qin Zhou said that with your years of income, you can't afford to buy a villa here. You must be a kept woman. Damn it. Hearing what Liang Yin said, Hua Jin was furious. Qin Zhou was actually criticizing him behind his back. Mistress? Was he that kind of gigolo? Hua Jin, I'm leaving. Yun Shishir suddenly interrupted his thoughts and waved at him. Hua Jin's smile immediately changed. He walked to the door and watched as Yun Shishir left. Then he retracted his smile and looked at the man beside him with resentment. Qin Zhou only felt an incomparably resentful gaze land on him. He was still a little surprised as to why Hua Jin was glaring at him like that. Liang Yin snickered behind him. Qin Zhou was speechless. Why are you staring at me like that? Nothing. Hua Jin said angrily, didn't you say you were busy? If there's anything else, I won't keep you. This was a serious order to chase him out. Qin Zhou was secretly puzzled by Hua Jin's sudden change in attitude. However, it was getting late and it was indeed time to leave. He turned around and said to Liang Yin, let's go. We're in a hurry. Okay. Liang Yin stood up and walked to Qin Zhou's side. Seeing that Hua Jin still had that resentful expression on his face, Qin Zhou was baffled and left. It was only after the two of them left that Hua Jin finally reacted. His current state was no different from being a kept woman. Chapter 41-51. Forget it. Why did he have to think about such messy things? Hua Jin took out his cell phone. As expected, he saw many missed calls. A few of them were from Alice. But, did he not wake up after so many calls? He remembered that his cell phone's ringtone was set very loudly. Moreover, his cell phone was placed beside his pillow. Was he sleeping too soundly? Did he not hear such a loud ringtone? Could it be that something had really happened to him? Just as he was wondering, Hua Jin suddenly realized that his cell phone had been set to silent mode. He was even more shocked. His cell phone had been ringing and vibrating all the time. Why had it been set to silent mode for no reason? No wonder he did not wake up after so many calls. Did someone touch his cell phone? Hua Jin did not have time to think too much. He dialed Alice's number as he walked towards the back garden. The call went through very quickly. Alice's nervous voice came from the other end. Hua Jin? It's me. Phew, Alice heaved a sigh of relief. Why didn't you pick up after calling you so many times? I fell asleep, Hua Jin explained. I accidentally set my cell phone to silent mode, so maybe I didn't hear it. Alice was stunned for a moment before she muttered, false alarm. Next time, don't set your cell phone to silent mode. Be careful. Otherwise, if you miss my call, I'll feel uneasy. Okay. How's Natalia now? Alice asked worriedly. Hua Jin happened to walk to the balcony. From his angle, he could see Natalia playing on the swing in the back garden. The little girl could actually sit still. Even if she was alone, she could still enjoy herself. He replied, she's fine. Now, she's playing on the swing by herself. You, didn't notice anything strange about her, right? Strange? Hua Jin shook his head. No. After a pause, he suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, does Natalia really have dual personality disorder? Yes. What happened? So far, no one has discovered what her second personality is like. Even you don't know, right? When Alice heard this, she sighed helplessly. I haven't known her for a long time, but her illness is different from Yu's. Her second personality was created by an outsider, and it's not a split mental world. What's the difference between this and Yu? Apart from the fact that one is a split in self and the other is a split in others, there doesn't seem to be any difference. You're wrong. Alice replied, split personalities have a strong sense of belonging to their own bodies and are independent. However, if it is created by others, it cannot be ruled out that it can be controlled. Controlled? Since Natalia's personality was created by the outside world, then it can be controlled. Then I have to suspect that her other personality can be controlled. This is not the same nature. I still don't understand. After all, Hua Jin was especially unfamiliar with this field. Chapter 41-52. A scary idea? Hua Jin didn't know why, but when he heard Alice's voice, he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Alice said slowly, do you know about the Personality Society? Personality Society? This unfamiliar term made Hua Jin a little confused. He said without hiding anything, I've never heard of it. It's normal that you don't know about it. However, the Personality Society may sound complicated, but it's actually very simple. Alice explained to him. The Personality Society is a society formed by many different personalities. These personalities live in the same body, but they each have their own duties. Among the personalities, there will be a leader who will be responsible for managing the other personalities. At the same time, this kind of personality also has the right to exile the other personalities. Is there such a case? Yes. Alice continued, so, Professor Romanka hopes to create a personality society and cultivate a leader personality. Finally, all the personalities other than the leader personality will be exiled, leaving only the leader personality. This will completely cure the multiple personalities. He has always wanted to conquer this field, but I feel that his idea is too eager for quick success. If in the end, these personalities can't be controlled, then the so-called Personality Society will be the real disaster. When Hua Jin heard this, he was terrified. Personality Society? How is that possible? Since it's a personality, then gradually, it will have its own independent thoughts. Aren't you afraid that it will rebel? I also reminded him, but he was very firm. He even started this experiment in private. I was very opposed to it, but you know, he won't listen to my opinion at all. Then, how did you take Natalia from him? Because, Alice smiled sinisterly. I had evidence that he used underage girls to conduct illegal experiments. Also, I threatened him that if he didn't hand her over, with my ability, I would definitely ruin his reputation. He was afraid, so he handed her over to me. But, even if Natalia was handed over to you, I had to keep an eye on her at all times. No one knows what her second personality is like. If it's a dangerous personality, I have to take her back. Hua Jin nodded. Alice sighed. I'm worried about you. If you develop feelings for Natalia, you won't be able to bear to part with her. Gong Jia entrusted her to me, so I will definitely take good care of her. If you want to bring her back, I will definitely cooperate. Yes. Then, report her situation to me at any time. Sorry to trouble you. It's nothing. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Hua Jin hung up. He stood on the balcony and looked in the direction of the swing, but he suddenly realized that the person had disappeared. Where is he? Just now, he saw her sitting on the swing, enjoying herself so much. Just as Hua Jin was wondering what was going on, Natalia's seductive voice came from behind him. "Are you looking for me?" Hua Jin was startled. He quickly turned around and saw Natalia standing behind him with her hands clasped behind her back, smiling obediently. "When did, just now, I saw you standing here talking on the phone. I guess that you must be looking for me, right?" Chapter 41:53. Hua Jin turned back to look in the direction of the garden swing. It was quite a distance away from here. Could it be that this guy knows how to use the blink skill? "How did you get here?" Natalia looked like she was sizing up an idiot. "Of course I walked over." Could it be that they flew over? "I don't have any special abilities." Hua Jin muttered to himself, "Why didn't I see you walking over? You were on the phone just now. You seemed very serious." Natalia asked curiously, "Who was it?" Hua Jin pondered for a moment and immediately said, "It was a friend." Natalia didn't like to be close to Alice. She was very unhappy with Alice's behavior, which was close to checking on her. Hence, Hua Jin avoided mentioning Alice in front of her. Natalia did not like Alice, and he knew that little secret. However, Natalia still guessed it. "Oh? Alice? How? How did you know? From your expression, it seems like you don't want me to know who it was." "Then, I guessed it right away. It must be that bad woman." Bad woman? Hua Jin was a little helpless. He squatted down in front of her and said patiently, "Alice isn't a bad woman. She's just a doctor. She's just helping you with your illness." When Natalia heard that, the smile on her face collapsed. She pursed her pink lips and corrected him seriously. "I'm not sick. I'm not a patient. I don't need her to monitor me. I'm not a criminal." She seemed to be very angry. Many people said that she was sick, that she was a patient. However, she didn't feel that she was a patient. She had seen patients before. She felt that she didn't fit the word sick. She didn't understand. She was fine. Why did everyone look at her as if she was sick? She didn't like those pitiful looks. It was as if she was a terminally ill person. She wasn't. Okay, you're not. I actually know." Natalia took a deep breath. "You've discussed it with Alice. You're in charge of monitoring me, aren't you?" Hua Jin was speechless. What he didn't know was that Natalia was so sensitive. Despite her young age, she had already noticed all of this. Seeing his expression, Natalia was disappointed and even disappointed. Slowly, she started to get closer to Hua Jin and developed feelings for Hua Jin. However, just as she was about to open her heart, this realization made her extremely disappointed. She looked around coldly and expressionlessly said, "This beautiful garden is just for me to stay in this prison. At least, I won't be so lonely. You said you wanted to accompany me, but it was only because Daddy couldn't bear to see me alone, right?" Hua Jin was at a loss for words, not knowing what to say. "Sometimes, I find it strange. Why is it that the way you look at me, you clearly want to be friends with me, but it makes me feel a little uncomfortable. You sympathize with me and pity me, right?" Natalia's sharp question made Hua Jin a little nervous. He did pity this child, but it wasn't purely because he liked her. He didn't really like children that much. Chapter 41:54. He even thought that if he was going to be alone in the future and would not be able to get married, then he would want to be a dink. He would actively do charity and donate his excess assets to those who were seriously ill or poor, but he would never think of adopting. He had accepted Gong Jie's conditions only because he had a responsibility and a lot of helplessness. He didn't really like Natalia. "I know you don't like me very much. Since you don't like me, I won't force you to like me. Then, please don't force yourself to like me." As Natalia said this, her lips curved into a smile. "But I will still get along with you peacefully. As she said this, she turned around and walked back into the room. Hua Jin looked at her back view silently. For a moment, he felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness. How could that be? Didn't I see that your relationship with Natalia has improved a lot that day at the amusement park? It was late at night. On the balcony, Hua Jin leaned against the railing, holding his cell phone and complaining to Yun Shusher. Maybe I really don't have the talent to be a stay-at-home dad. I've tried my best to get on her good side, but this child is so sensitive. With just one look, she denied everything I've done. She's only 6 or 7 years old, but her mind is already so delicate and mature. When Yun Shusher heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. This is very similar to Yu. Is it? Yu has been very sensitive since he was young. To what extent can he do? Even with just one look, he can tell whether that person likes or dislikes him. Natalia is the same. Hua Jin sighed helplessly. I don't mean to dislike her. It's just that, she appeared too suddenly. Overnight, I was promoted from a single dog to a newbie stay-at-home dad. Although I'm a stand-in stay-at-home dad, my identity changed too quickly. I can't adjust my mentality. On this point, I can understand. Yun Shusher continued, however, you have to think about it. You haven't experienced the process of preparation, unlike my husband. From preparing for pregnancy, to nurturing the fetus, he has been constantly preparing. A man's paternal nature was different from his maternal nature. Motherhood was innate. Perhaps when she didn't have children, she would feel an inexplicable throbbing when she saw other people's children. As for men, there were even some men who didn't realize that they were fathers until their children were 5 or 6 years old. This kind of fatherly nature is generally awakened later. I want to get close to her, Hua Jin said sincerely. You want to get close to her because you promised Alice that you would cooperate with Alice to monitor this child, right? Whenever you want to get close to her, it's because you truly want to get close to your daughter from the perspective of a father. This way, your child will also sincerely open her heart to you. Pausing for a moment, Yun Shusher suddenly smiled helplessly. I think this child is a little fragile and sensitive. His thoughts are even a little extreme. It's very difficult to get along with her and open up her heart. Isn't that so? Hua Jin asked for help. Then what should I do? I don't want her to guard against me like I'm a wolf. She said that she's not a patient, but she doesn't know her own physical condition. Chapter 41-55. Hua Jin, maybe you don't understand. Yun Shusher smiled. Even someone as smart and sensible as you doesn't want to be treated like a patient. He and Natalia are the same. They are both strong-willed. They can be indifferent to any contempt, but they can't take pity on them lightly. If you treat her like a patient, she will definitely be unhappy. Because she doesn't feel like a patient. She's just a little different from others. You have to think about it. Natalia didn't have a home since she was young. She didn't have a sense of belonging, so she has a stubborn personality. She can only protect herself fully like a hedgehog. Actually, you can understand that too, right? Yun Shusher also grew up in the welfare home. She wasn't as aloof as Natalia. She was stubborn, but she didn't want to grow those thorns. Even though she had suffered so many injuries, she was still willing to smile and report to the world. Because when she was young, someone once told her something. She couldn't remember who that person was. She only remembered that one sentence: there is only one kind of heroism in this world, and that is to recognize the darkness of reality and still love it. She wanted to be this hero. But Natalia was different. She could only use her thorns to protect herself. Hua Jin seemed to be deep in thought. He said seriously, I understand. When he was young, Hua Jin often felt strange gazes from all kinds of people. They belittled him and saw him clearly. However, he had already become numb to those gazes and forgotten them. He only vaguely remembered that he was once injured and was sent to the hospital. A doctor saw him and looked at him with a look of pity and sympathy as he looked at him with bruises all over his body. That kind of gaze, however, made him feel as if his heart was about to bleed. It wasn't that he hated that gaze. It was an unfamiliar feeling. He didn't like it. "I got it?" Xianxia asked. "It's so late." "Is she asleep?" "Yeah, she's asleep." "I think so. I didn't go to her room. I'll sneak in later to take a look." "Yeah, it's late. I'm going to tell you a bedtime story." "Okay, good night." Hua Jin hung up the phone and placed it on the railing. He raised his head in confusion. He gazed at the night sky. This made him involuntarily recall his youth. Many times, after being beaten, he would also secretly stand under the night sky, raise his head, and ask himself, as if he was asking God, but also as if he was asking himself. When would the dark days end? At that time, life was really dark. He even felt that sometimes, he had the courage to die, but not the courage to live on. But now, he could no longer remember those gloomy memories. Time could really make one forget everything. Unknowingly. It was late at night. Hua Jin quietly walked to the door of Natalia's room. He turned the doorknob, opened the door, and walked in. Natalia was already asleep on the bed, but the whole room was lit up with purple light. Hua Jin couldn't help but be curious. This kind of purple light was seductive and deep. He didn't remember buying a purple lamp before. This purple light seemed to be coming from the corner of the bed. Hua Jin curiously walked to the head of the bed and realized that the light was coming from a crystal ball. Crystal ball?